Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The diesel engine of my Peterbilt hummed its familiar rhythm as I pulled into the rest stop just outside of Amarillo, Texas. The digital clock on my dashboard glowed 11:17 p.m., October 15th, 2019. My name's Zephyr. Yeah, I know. Weird name. My mother had a thing for mythology, said it meant west wind, and that it would carry me to great places. Been driving trucks for 12 years now, covering every major route from Seattle to Miami, from San Diego to Boston. I've seen my share of strange things on America's highways. Ghost lights in Texas, unexplained accidents in Nevada, drivers who swear they've seen things that couldn't possibly exist. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that October night. The rest stop was one of those older ones, built back in the 70s when the interstate system was still young and full of promise. You know the type. Concrete buildings with that institutional yellow lighting that makes everyone look sick, like they're suffering from some kind of jaundice. The vending machines hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration, still selling Tab and other sodas that most people forgot existed. The bathroom stalls had those gaps between the doors and frames wide enough to make anyone uncomfortable, and the mirrors were that scratched-up metal that barely showed your reflection. But it had a decent parking area for trucks. Wide spaces marked out with fading yellow paint, and after 14 hours on the road hauling a load of industrial refrigeration units from Oklahoma City to Phoenix, I wasn't in a position to be picky. I counted maybe 8 or 9 other rigs already parked when I pulled in. A few were running, their engines idling with that steady rumble that becomes white noise after you've been driving long enough. Others were dark and silent, their drivers presumably catching some much-needed sleep. The air had that sharp October chill that cuts right through your jacket no matter how many layers you're wearing, the kind that makes you think about winter coming and whether you've got enough saved up to get through the slow season. The wind was picking up too, whistling through the gaps between the trucks and carrying with it the smell of diesel exhaust and something else. Something that reminded me of burned metal and old blood. I grabbed my thermos, still had maybe half a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, and my jacket, the heavy Carhartt one my ex-wife had bought me 3 Christmases ago, back when we were still trying to make things work. I locked my cab twice, checking the door handle both times because you can never be too careful at these rest stops. Too many stories about drivers getting robbed, or worse, while they're catching a few hours of sleep. Then I headed toward the main building, my boots crunching on the gravel and broken glass that littered the parking lot. That's when I first noticed something was off. Usually, when you walk into a rest stop at night, especially one with this many trucks parked outside, you'll run into at least 1 or 2 other drivers. We tend to congregate, share stories about traffic on I-40, complain about dispatch sending us through construction zones, compare notes on which truck stops have the best coffee or the cleanest showers. It's a brotherhood of sorts, born from the shared experience of living our lives on the road, away from our families, eating terrible food, and dealing with four-wheelers who don't understand what it takes to stop 80,000 pounds of steel and cargo. But the place was empty. Not a soul in sight. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with that particular frequency that gives you a headache if you stand under them too long, casting harsh shadows in the corners where the walls met the floor. The whole place smelled like industrial disinfectant trying to cover up something worse. Piss and decay, and that particular brand of human misery that accumulates in places where people only stop when they have no choice. My footsteps echoed off the tile floors, which were once white, but had turned a kind of grayish yellow from years of neglect and half-hearted mopping. Somebody had carved "Jesus Saves" into one of the wooden benches near the entrance, and someone else had added "But Muhammad invests" underneath it in different handwriting. The men's room door creaked when I pushed it open, the hinges protesting like they hadn't been oiled since the place was built. I half expected to find someone in there. Maybe another driver washing up at the sinks or one of those rest stop regulars who seem to live in these places, moving from one to another like modern nomads. But again, nothing. Just the steady drip of a leaky faucet, probably wasting hundreds of gallons of water a month, and the hum of the ventilation system that wasn't doing much to ventilate anything. The smell in here was worse. That concentrated ammonia stench that burns your nostrils mixed with the sweet, sick smell of marijuana and something chemical I couldn't identify. I did my business quickly, that feeling of being watched crawling up my spine the whole time. You know that feeling, like when you're a kid and you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and you're convinced something's waiting in the shadows, ready to grab you the moment you let your guard down. That primal fear that lives in the back of your brain, left over from when our ancestors had to worry about predators in the dark. That's what it felt like, except I'm a 43-year-old man who's seen enough real dangers on the road. Black ice in Montana, fog so thick in California you can't see 10 feet ahead, tornadoes in Oklahoma that'll flip a truck like a toy, to know the difference between paranoia and instinct. And my instinct was screaming at me that something was very, very wrong here. I finished up, washed my hands in water that came out brown for the first few seconds, then dried them on my jeans because the paper towel dispenser was empty and the air dryer was broken. When I came out of the bathroom, there was a man standing by the vending machines. He wasn't there before. I was absolutely sure of it. I'd looked at those vending machines when I walked in, noticed that half the slots were empty, and the lights inside were flickering like they were about to burn out. There had been nobody there. But now this guy was standing right in front of them, his face inches from the glass like he was studying the candy bars and chips with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. The guy was dressed like a trucker, worn Wranglers with oil stains on the thighs, a red and black flannel shirt that had seen better days, and a mesh-back trucker cap with Peterbilt embroidered on the front. But something about him seemed rehearsed, like he was wearing a costume he'd put together from watching movies about truckers rather than actually being one. His boots were too clean, for one thing. No trucker who's been on the road for more than a day has boots that clean. And his hands, when I could see them, were soft, uncalloused, the hands of someone who'd never had to change a tire in the rain or check tie-down straps until his fingers bled. He was probably in his 50s, thin to the point of being gaunt, with skin that looked gray under the fluorescent lights. Not pale, not washed out, but gray, like all the color had been drained out of him and replaced with something else. His hair, what I could see of it under the cap, was the color of ash. "Evening," he said, not looking at me, just staring at the vending machine like it held the secrets of the universe. His voice had a strange quality to it, like it was coming from somewhere deeper in his chest than it should, echoing slightly in the empty rest stop. "Evening," I replied, keeping my distance. I'd learned long ago that rest stops attract all kinds of people, and not all of them are harmless. Some are just lonely and want someone to talk to. Some are looking for trouble, and some are something else entirely. "You heading east or west?" he asked, still not looking at me. His reflection in the vending machine glass was distorted, stretched out like a funhouse mirror, but I could see his eyes in it. They were pale, so pale they were almost white. "West," I said, not volunteering any more information than necessary. "Phoenix." He nodded slowly, the movement almost mechanical. "Long haul. Good money in Phoenix. Construction boom, they say. Lots of materials needing transport." He paused, then added, "You planning to rest here?" Something in the way he asked made my skin crawl. It wasn't casual conversation. It felt like an interview, like he was checking items off a list in his head. "Just a quick break," I lied. I'd actually planned to catch a few hours of sleep, maybe 4 or 5 if I could manage it. My electronic logbook would show I was taking my mandated rest period, and I needed it. The last 100 miles had been rough, fighting crosswinds that tried to push my trailer into the other lane. But every instinct I had was telling me to get back in my truck and keep driving, tired or not. "Might want to reconsider," he said, finally turning to look at me directly. His eyes were even worse straight on, not just pale, but with something moving in them, like clouds passing behind glass. "Good things happen to drivers who rest here. Real good things. That so?" I tried to keep my voice neutral, but my hand had unconsciously moved to my pocket where I kept my knife. It wasn't much, just a folding buck knife with a 4-inch blade. But it was better than nothing. "Oh yes," he said, and smiled. His teeth were perfect, too perfect, like dentures, but they were his real teeth. I could tell because the gums around them were the wrong color. A dark purple-black, like he had some kind of disease. "We take care of our own here. Brothers of the road, you might say." Before I could respond, the door to the rest stop burst open with enough force to make the windows rattle. Another trucker walked in, but walked isn't the right word. He moved with purpose, with intent, like a soldier entering enemy territory. This one was younger, maybe 30, built like a linebacker who'd kept in shape after college. 6'4" at least, probably 250, all muscle. His hands were the size of ham hocks, and the knuckles were scarred like he'd been in more than his share of fights. He looked between me and the thin man, and something passed between them. Some kind of silent communication that I couldn't read but could feel. The way you can feel the pressure change before a storm. "Orville," the thin man said to the newcomer, "we have a visitor." Orville smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were focused on me with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "I see that, Ambrose. Heading west, is he?" "Phoenix," Ambrose confirmed. I was just telling him about the benefits of resting here. "That's a shame," Orville said, walking closer to me. Each step was measured, calculated to seem casual, but actually cutting off my angles of escape. I'd seen enough bar fights to recognize the technique. "We were hoping you might be interested in something more profitable." I took a step back, my hand tightening on the knife in my pocket. "I've got a delivery to make. Company's expecting—" "Companies," Ambrose interrupted, moving to flank me from the other side. "Don't care about you. You know that, right? You're just a number to them, a vehicle to move their products, expendable, replaceable. They'll work you until you drop, then hire another driver before your body's cold." "But here—" He gestured vaguely at the rest stop, but somehow the gesture seemed to encompass much more. The parking lot, the highway, maybe the whole country. "Here, we take care of our own." "I should go," I said, moving toward the door, trying to keep both of them in my peripheral vision. Orville stepped in front of me, not aggressively exactly, but definitely blocking my path. Up close, I could smell him. Diesel and sweat and something else, something chemical and wrong, like formaldehyde. "At least hear us out. You might be surprised what we have to offer." "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what you guys are selling, but I'm not interested. I don't do drugs, I don't run illegal cargo, and I sure as hell don't get involved in whatever this is." "We're not selling anything," Ambrose said from behind me. I was now caught between them, trapped in a human sandwich with no good way out. "We're offering membership, brotherhood, protection." "Protection from what?" Orville's smile widened, showing too many teeth. From the people who don't want drivers like us to succeed. From the companies that exploit us. From the government that regulates us to death. Electronic logs, speed limiters, CSA scores, DOT inspections every time you turn around. We've found a way to fight back. And what way is that? Come outside, Ambrose said. Let us show you something. Every fiber of my being screamed at me not to follow them. This was how people ended up as statistics, as those news stories you hear about truckers found dead at rest stops, robbed and murdered for the few $100s in their wallet. But I was curious. And more importantly, I wasn't sure they'd let me leave if I didn't at least play along. Orville was blocking the door, and Ambrose was close enough behind me that I could feel his breath on my neck, cold and smelling of something rotten. So I followed them out into the cold October night. The parking lot looked different now. The trucks that had seemed randomly parked before were actually arranged in a rough semicircle, all facing inward toward a central point like some kind of automotive Stonehenge. Their headlights were off, but their parking lights were on, creating an amber glow that made the shadows dance and writhe. And standing next to each truck was its driver, all men, all watching us as we emerged from the building. There were more of them than I'd initially counted. Maybe 15, maybe 20. They ranged in age from early 20s to late 60s, different races, different builds, but they all had the same look in their eyes, empty, hollow, like something vital had been scooped out and replaced with something else. "Welcome," Ambrose said, spreading his arms wide like a revival preacher about to save some souls, "to the first meeting of tonight's gathering." That's when I noticed the symbols painted on the sides of some of the trucks. Small, barely visible in the amber light, but there, strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to move when you weren't quite looking at them, shifting and changing like living things. Some were simple, just a few intersecting lines. Others were complex, fractal patterns that seemed to go deeper than the surface they were painted on, like looking into a hole that went down forever. And the way the drivers stood, so still, so silent like they were waiting for something. Not moving, barely even breathing. Just standing there like mannequins that had been posed by someone who didn't quite understand how humans were supposed to stand. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "This," Orville said, "is freedom. This is power. This is what happens when drivers stop being victims and start taking control." One of the other drivers stepped forward. He was older, maybe 60, with a grizzled beard that had gone more gray than brown and eyes that looked hollow in the amber light, like someone had pressed thumbs into clay and left indentations. His flannel shirt was torn in places, and through the tears I could see his skin had the same grayish pallor as Ambrose's. 3 months ago, he said, his voice rough like he'd been gargling gravel, I was nobody, barely making ends meet. Getting pushed around by every dispatcher who thought they owned me, every DOT officer who wanted to make their quota, every punk kid who thought truckers were easy marks, sleeping in my truck because I couldn't afford a motel, eating cold beans out of a can because I couldn't afford hot food. He paused, and when he continued, his voice had changed, become something darker, hungrier. Then I found them. Or they found me, here, at this very rest stop. They showed me the truth. They showed me what we could become if we just stopped following their rules. "And now?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Now I take what I want," he said simply. "And nobody can stop me. The companies think their cargo is safe? We take it. The government thinks they can track us? We disappear. The other drivers think they're better than us. They learn different." I noticed movement in the shadows between the trucks. More figures, but these weren't truckers. They were smaller, hunched, moving in ways that didn't seem quite right. like their joints bent in directions human joints shouldn't bend. When one of them passed through a patch of light, I caught a glimpse of its face and had to suppress a gasp. It had been human once, that much was clear, but now it was something else. The features were all wrong. Eyes too far apart, mouth too wide, skin that looked like melted wax that had been reshaped by clumsy hands, and the way it moved, scuttling rather than walking, using its hands as much as its feet. "Who are they?" I asked, pointing with a trembling hand. Ambrose's pale eyes gleamed with something that might have been pride. "Associates, helpers, former drivers who didn't quite meet our standards but still had their uses. They make sure our operations run smoothly." "Operations?" "Cargo redistribution," Orville said, like he was explaining something simple to a child. "We take from those who have too much, share with those who understand the true order of things. The companies write it off as theft, shrinkage, lost in transit. They're insured. They don't really lose anything, but we gain everything." It clicked then. These weren't just truckers, they were thieves, hijackers, an organized ring that was stealing cargo and using these rest stops as meeting points. But that didn't explain the things in the shadows, or the symbols, or the way the very air around them felt wrong, poisoned somehow. "You're talking about organized crime," I said flatly. "Crime?" Ambrose laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a dry rasping sound like wind through dead leaves. "Is it a crime to take back what's been stolen from us? Every day, companies make billions off our backs. We drive their goods across the country. We risk our lives on dangerous roads. We spend weeks away from our families, destroying our bodies and minds for their profit. And what do we get? Pennies on the dollar, table scraps, regulations that make it impossible to make a living. They've criminalized our entire existence. Can't idle your truck to stay warm. Can't drive more than 11 hours even if you're wide awake. Can't stop where you want. Can't refuse a load even if it's going to a dangerous area. Every year, there are more rules, more restrictions, more ways for them to fine us and control us. Who are the real criminals? So you steal from them. We redistribute," Orville corrected, his voice taking on an edge of fervor. "And we're very selective about it. Only certain cargo from certain companies. The ones who treat drivers the worst. The ones who deserve it. Amazon, leaving drivers to piss in bottles because they don't give them time for bathroom breaks. Walmart, paying drivers so little they qualify for food stamps. The mega carriers who treat drivers like robots, tracking their every move, measuring their every minute." One of the shadow figures moved closer, drawn perhaps by the raised voices, and I finally got a good look at it. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. It was a person, or had been once. Now it was something else, something that violated every natural law I understood. Its limbs were too long, joints bending in places they shouldn't, like someone had broken all its bones and let them heal wrong. Its fingers had too many knuckles, and they moved independently like spider legs. Its face was human enough to be recognizable, but the proportions were all wrong. Jaw too wide, forehead too narrow, eyes that had migrated to the sides of its head like a prey animal's. But the worst part was that there was still intelligence in those eyes, still a spark of consciousness that suggested that somewhere inside that twisted form, a human mind was trapped, aware of what it had become. "What the hell is that?" I whispered, my voice cracking. Ambrose followed my gaze with the detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. "That's Mitchell, or what's left of him. He tried to leave our organization once, tried to report us to the authorities. We couldn't allow that, of course. But waste not, want not. He serves a different purpose now." The thing that had been Mitchell tilted its head at an unnatural angle, almost 180 degrees, studying me with eyes that held just enough intelligence to show suffering, just enough humanity to make it horrifying rather than simply monstrous. "You're insane," I breathed, taking another step back only to bump into Orville's massive chest. "Are we?" Ambrose asked, his voice philosophical. "Or are we just practical? Mitchell made his choice. He could have had wealth, brotherhood, protection. Instead, he chose betrayal. And now he helps us in other ways. Loading cargo, keeping watch, handling problems. Problems like drivers who won't join." "Smart man," Orville said from behind me, his hand falling on my shoulder like a vice. "But we're hoping it won't come to that. You seem like someone who understands how the world really works. Someone who's tired of being stepped on. I'm doing just fine on my own." "Are you?" Ambrose pulled out a smartphone, one of those new models with the big screen, and tapped it a few times. Then he showed it to me. It was my employee file from Heartland Trucking, complete with my photo, address, emergency contacts, my ex-wife Sarah in Houston, my teenage daughter Emma, who just turned 16. The screen showed more than just contact information. It had Sarah's work schedule at the hospital where she was a nurse, Emma's school records, her Instagram account, photos of her at track practice. They'd done their homework. They knew everything. "How did you—" "We have people everywhere," Ambrose said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Dispatchers, clerks, even some management. The network is vast, Zephyr. It stretches from coast to coast, border to border, and it protects those who belong to it, but those who reject us, who threaten us." He glanced meaningfully at the Mitchell thing, which had scuttled closer, close enough that I could smell it, rot and motor oil and something chemical, like antifreeze. "Are you threatening my family?" My hand went to my knife, though I knew it would be useless against all of them. "We're explaining reality," Orville said calmly, his grip on my shoulder tightening. "Join us, and they'll never want for anything. You'll have more money than you know what to do with. Emma's college? Paid for. Sarah's mortgage? Gone. You could retire in 5 years, 10 at most, with enough money to live like a king. Refuse us, and, well, we can't have loose ends." We wouldn't have to," Ambrose interrupted. "Accidents happen. A nurse working late shifts, tired. Maybe her car develops brake problems. A teenage girl walking home from track practice. Maybe she takes a wrong turn, ends up in the wrong neighborhood. We wouldn't have to do anything directly. The world is a dangerous place, and without protection—" He let the threat hang in the air like smoke from a cigarette. I looked around the circle again, my mind racing for options. These men had made their choice. They'd traded their humanity for money and power, allied themselves with something that turned people into those things in the shadows, and now they wanted me to do the same. The other truckers had moved closer now, tightening the circle. In the amber light from the parking lights, I could see them more clearly. Each one had the same hollow look in their eyes, like something essential had been drained out of them and replaced with something else, something that wore their faces like masks. Some of them had visible marks on their exposed skin. Not tattoos, but something that looked burned or carved into the flesh. Symbols that matched the ones painted on the trucks. One of them, a Hispanic man in his 40s with a mustache that had gone gray at the edges, was muttering something under his breath. It wasn't English, wasn't Spanish either. It sounded older than both, a language that predated highways and trucks, maybe predated civilization itself. The words made my teeth ache just hearing them. "What's this mark you mentioned?" I asked, stalling for time while my mind raced for a way out. Orville rolled up his sleeve with the practiced motion of someone who'd done this demonstration before. On his forearm was a brand, not a tattoo, but an actual burn mark in the shape of that same geometric pattern I'd seen on the trucks. But this one was different. It seemed to move slightly, like it was alive under his skin, pulsing with a rhythm that didn't match his heartbeat. The skin around it was discolored, not red or inflamed like a fresh burn, but that same grayish color I'd noticed on Ambrose, spreading out from the mark like an infection. "It bonds you to the network," he explained, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining something to a particularly slow student. "Lets us know where you are, lets you know where we are, and it ensures loyalty." "Ensures? You can't betray what you're part of," Ambrose said, moving around to where I could see him better. In the amber light, his pale eyes looked almost luminescent, like a cat's eyes catching headlights. "The mark makes sure of that. Try to go to the cops and your tongue won't work. The words simply won't come. Try to run and your legs won't carry you far. It's insurance for both sides." "Both sides of what?" I asked, though I was starting to piece it together. "The arrangement," Ambrose said. "We serve the network, and the network serves, well, let's call them our senior partners." "Senior partners?" Orville laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "You didn't think we came up with this on our own, did you? The knowledge, the power, the ability to reshape flesh and bone?" He gestured at the Mitchell thing, which had crawled even closer, its malformed hands leaving wet prints on the asphalt. "This is ancient, Zephyr, older than the highways, older than America. There have always been those who travel the roads, carrying more than just cargo. And there have always been things that hunger for what humans can provide." "You're talking about demons," I said flatly. "Devils, evil spirits, labels," Ambrose said dismissively, waving a hand like he was swatting away a fly. "Human words for things humans don't understand. They're no more demons than we are angels. They're just different, from somewhere else, and they're willing to trade." "Trade what?" "Power for service," Orville said. "We bring them what they need. They give us what we want. Simple capitalism, really. The most American thing in the world." "What do they need?" The circle of truckers all smiled at once, the synchronization of it making my skin crawl. It was like watching puppets all pulled by the same string. "Experiences," Ambrose said softly. "They feed on experiences. Fear, pain, desperation, hope, love, all of it. Human emotions are like wine to them, and the stronger the emotion, the better the vintage. A mother's terror when her child goes missing. A father's rage when he realizes he's been betrayed. A young girl's hope turning to despair when she realizes no one is coming to save her." My stomach turned. "You're talking about kidnapping, murder." "Sometimes," Orville admitted without a trace of shame. "But not always. Sometimes it's just about creating situations. A truck jackknifes at just the right moment, causing a pileup. Families separated, lives destroyed, all that beautiful chaos and emotion for our partners to feast on. And in return, we get wealth, protection, and power. That's evil. Pure evil." "Evil?" Ambrose tilted his head, genuinely seeming to consider the word. "Is a lion evil when it eats a gazelle? Is a spider evil when it wraps a fly in silk? We're just another part of the food chain, Zephyr. Humans have just forgotten that they're not always at the top." A semi's horn blared in the distance, sudden and sharp in the night air. Everyone turned to look. Another truck was pulling into the rest stop, its headlights sweeping across the gathered crowd like searchlights in a prison yard. It wasn't following the pattern, wasn't part of their circle. It was just pulling in normally, parking in one of the empty spots near the edge of the lot. Ambrose frowned, deep lines creasing his gray skin. "We weren't expecting anyone else tonight." "Could be a regular driver." Orville suggested, but his hand had moved to something in his pocket. Something that made a metallic click when he touched it. Or could be trouble, one of the other truckers said, the one with the graying mustache who'd been muttering in that strange language. Could be someone looking for us. The new truck's engine shut off and the door opened. The driver got out. A big man, Native American from the look of him, wearing a leather jacket despite the cold. He moved with the confidence of someone who either didn't know what he was walking into or didn't care. As he got closer, I could see he was older than I'd first thought. Maybe mid-50s, with silver streaking through his long black hair that he wore in a ponytail. His face was weathered but strong, with deep lines around his eyes that suggested he'd seen things, maybe things as bad as what I was seeing now. "Evening, brothers," he called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot with surprising authority. "Hell of a cold night for a gathering." "This is a private meeting," Ambrose said, moving to intercept him. The other truckers shifted, ready to block the newcomer if necessary. "Is it now?" The newcomer's eyes found mine across the distance, and something in them made me think he knew exactly what was happening. "Because, from where I'm standing, looks like you're having a recruitment drive. And recruitment drives are supposed to be voluntary, according to the old laws." The moment he said old laws, the atmosphere changed. The truckers went rigid, and even the shadow things stopped their constant movement. Ambrose's pale eyes narrowed to slits. "The old laws," Orville scoffed, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "What would you know about—" The newcomer held up his hand, and I saw he had a mark too, but different. Older looking, more complex. The geometric patterns were more intricate, like comparing a child's drawing to a masterpiece, and they definitely moved under his skin, pulsing with a rhythm that made my eyes water to follow. "I know enough," he said. "Phoenix chapter. We heard you might be getting a little aggressive with your recruitment methods up here. Phoenix chapter. My destination." Was this more than coincidence? "This doesn't concern Phoenix," Ambrose said, but I heard fear in his voice for the first time. "Everything on this highway concerns Phoenix," the newcomer said. He looked at me again, and this time he addressed me directly. "You. Driver, you want to be here?" It was my chance, maybe my only chance. "No, they're threatening my family if I don't join." The newcomer shook his head slowly, and several of the truckers took a step back. Even the Mitchell thing retreated into the shadows. "Amarillo chapter always was too eager," the man said. "You're violating the accords, brothers. Forced recruitment brings attention. Attention brings hunters. You want another situation like Little Rock?" The mention of Little Rock had an immediate effect on the gathered truckers. Several of them shifted uncomfortably, and even the twisted things in the shadows seemed to pull back. Ambrose's pale eyes narrowed, but there was fear there now, mixing with his anger. "Little Rock was different," he said carefully. "Those were rogue elements." "Were they?" the Phoenix driver asked, walking closer. In the harsh light of the rest stop, I could see his mark more clearly. It wasn't just older, it was different in nature, like comparing a crude copy to an original. The geometric patterns were more intricate, and they definitely moved under his skin, pulsing with a rhythm that made my eyes water to follow. Or were they just another chapter that got too greedy, too violent, and brought the wrong kind of attention? "Who are you?" Orville demanded. "Phoenix chapter doesn't have authority here." "Name's Joseph Crowdog," the man said, and several of the truckers took another step back. Even Ambrose looked shaken. "We've heard of you," Ambrose said quietly. "You're one of the first." "Not the first, but old enough," Joseph confirmed. He turned to me. "You. What's your name? Zephyr. He nodded. Unusual name. Good name. Listen to me, Zephyr. These men, they're offering you something real. The network exists. The power is real. The money is very real. But what they're not telling you is the cost. We've told him, Orville started. Have you? Joseph interrupted. Have you told him about the dreams? About how the mark burns when you try to sleep? About how you'll start seeing things in your mirrors that aren't there, or maybe are there but shouldn't be? Have you told him about the hunger? The hunger? I asked. Joseph rolled up his other sleeve. His entire arm was covered in marks, overlapping patterns that created a map of scars and burns that seemed to writhe in the fluorescent light. But worse than that was what was between the marks, patches of skin that looked like they were turning into something else, something that reminded me uncomfortably of the twisted things in the shadows. The more you use the network, the more you need it, Joseph explained. The mark isn't just a bond, it's a parasite. It feeds on you, and you feed it through the work. Skip a job, miss a meeting, try to go straight for too long, and it starts eating you from the inside. Eventually, you become like them. He nodded toward where Mitchell crouched in the shadows. Still conscious, still aware, but no longer human. No longer able to die. Just existing in service to the network forever. That's not, Ambrose began. Show him your chest, Ambrose, Joseph commanded. Show him what 20 years in the network really looks like. Ambrose didn't move, but his hand unconsciously went to his chest, pressing against something under his shirt. He won't, so I will, Joseph said, and pulled off his leather jacket and shirt. His entire torso was covered in the marks, layer upon layer of them, creating a map of scars and burns that seemed to writhe independent of his movement. But worse than the marks was what was happening to his skin between them. It was changing, becoming something that wasn't quite flesh anymore. In some places it looked like scales, in others like chitin. Some patches seemed to be developing eyes, small, black, unblinking things that tracked movement independently. This is what dedication to the network looks like, Joseph said, his voice carrying across the silent parking lot. This is what they're really offering you. Not freedom, not power, just a different kind of slavery, a worse kind, because at least human masters eventually die. The things we serve, they're eternal, and so is our service. You're still here, Orville pointed out, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. Still working. Still part of it. Because I can't leave, Joseph said simply. None of us can, once we're in deep enough. The mark won't let us. Try to run, and it brings you back. Try to die, and it won't let you. I've been trying to find a way out for 15 years. He put his shirt back on and faced me. But you still have a choice. The Amarillo chapter broke protocol by threatening you. Under the old laws, the ones that founded the network, recruitment must be voluntary. Truly voluntary, not coerced. The old laws are just guidelines, Ambrose said, but he sounded desperate now. Are they? Joseph pulled something from his pocket. A coin, ancient-looking, made of some metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The symbols on it matched the marks, but these were the originals, the source from which all the others had been copied. I invoke the right of arbitration. Denver rules. The effect was immediate and absolute. All the truckers, even Ambrose and Orville, dropped to their knees like someone had cut their strings. The twisted things in the shadows prostrated themselves completely, pressing their misshapen bodies to the ground with sounds like breaking joints. Even the air seemed to change, becoming heavier, charged with something that made my skin prickle. What's happening? I whispered. The network has rules older than the highways, Joseph explained, though he kept his eyes on the kneeling truckers. Rules written by the things that gave us the marks. I'm calling on those rules now. You get to leave free and clear. No retaliation against you or your family. The chapter won't accept this, Ambrose said from his knees, his voice strained, like speaking was physically painful. The chapter doesn't have a choice, Joseph replied, unless you want to challenge me directly. Ambrose looked up, and for a moment I thought he might actually do it. His face was changing, features shifting, becoming less human. His jaw was extending, teeth multiplying and sharpening. His pale eyes were spreading apart, migrating toward the sides of his head. But then he looked at Joseph's marks, at the way they pulsed with power, at the things growing from his skin that suggested how far the transformation could go, and he lowered his head again. The challenge is declined, he said, through gritted teeth that were no longer entirely human. Smart choice. Joseph turned to me. Get in your truck. Drive to Phoenix. Don't stop at any rest stops along the way. Gas stations only, and only in daylight. When you get to Phoenix, deliver your load and forget this ever happened. Will they really leave me alone? I asked, looking at the kneeling figures, at the shadow things that writhed in apparent agony. They'll have to. I've invoked the old laws. Breaking them would bring consequences worse than anything the cops could do. He paused, and his expression softened slightly. But Zephyr, don't ever speak of this. Don't warn other drivers. Don't try to be a hero. The network has existed for decades, maybe centuries. It's too big to fight, too connected to stop. Your only option is to stay invisible to it. I nodded, already backing toward my truck. Thank you. Don't thank me, Joseph said, and there was infinite sadness in his voice. I'm not doing this out of kindness. The network needs to stay hidden to survive. Forced recruitment leads to scared drivers talking to the wrong people. That leads to investigations. Investigations lead to exposure. And exposure... He glanced at the twisted things, at what Mitchell had become. Exposure would be bad for everyone. I made it to my truck, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. The engine roared to life, and I've never been so grateful for that sound. As I pulled out of the rest stop, I looked in my mirrors one last time. The circle of truckers was still there, still kneeling, with Joseph standing in the center like some kind of dark priest. The amber lights made the scene look like something out of a medieval painting, penitents before a saint, or damned souls before their judge. Then my truck rounded the curve in the exit ramp, and they were gone from view. I drove straight through to Phoenix, 12 hours without stopping except once for gas at a busy truck stop in full daylight, surrounded by normal people doing normal things. Families heading somewhere for vacation, business people grabbing coffee, normal human activity that seemed like a miracle after what I'd witnessed. I delivered my load of refrigeration units, collected my pay, and immediately told dispatch I needed a week off for a family emergency. They weren't happy, but they couldn't force me to drive. I spent that week at home in Fort Worth, sleeping with all the lights on, jumping at every sound. I researched what I could about the network, carefully, using library computers and paying cash for everything, never using my own devices or internet connection. What I found terrified me more than that night at the rest stop. Disappearances along major trucking routes had increased by 300% in the last 5 years, but they were spread out enough that no one had connected them. Rest stops were being abandoned at record rates, with state governments citing budget concerns. But if you dug deeper, the reports always mentioned unusual activity or safety concerns before closure. The rest stop outside Amarillo, where I'd had my encounter? It was closed 2 weeks after that night, officially for renovation. It never reopened. There were rumors in the darkest corners of trucker forums, posts that would appear for a few hours before being deleted. Drivers who'd seen things, encountered things, and lived to tell about it. Stories about trucks that would appear and disappear on stretches of highway where there were no exits. Cargo that would vanish from locked trailers. Drivers who would change, becoming something else, something wrong. But what scared me most was the pattern I started to see. The stolen cargo, the redistributed goods, they weren't random. It was specific items going to specific places. Electronics going to coordinates in the desert where there was supposedly nothing. Chemicals being rerouted to abandoned industrial sites. Construction equipment vanishing near old mining towns. Medical supplies, especially surgical equipment and preservation chemicals, disappearing from hospitals and ending up nowhere. Or at least nowhere on any official record. It was like they were building something, or feeding something, or both. I went back to driving after that week, but everything was different. I stuck to day runs when I could, short hauls that would have me home by dark. When I had to do overnight runs, I planned them carefully. Major highways only, well-lit truck stops with security cameras and lots of people. Never rest stops, never alone. But I couldn't stop thinking about what Joseph had said, about the things that gave them the marks. Things, plural, not human, not from here. And old, older than the highways, older than America. What were they? What did they want? And why did they need human emotions, human experiences, human suffering? 3 months later, I was hauling furniture from Dallas to San Diego. It should have been a simple run, but delays piled up. Road construction, accidents, weather. Before I knew it, I was driving through New Mexico in the dead of night, running on fumes. The choice was simple. Risk running out of gas on a dark highway, or stop at the rest stop 5 miles ahead that had diesel pumps. I told myself I'd just fuel up and go. 5 minutes, maximum, in and out. The rest stop was newer than the one outside Amarillo, well lit with security cameras visible. There were 3 other trucks there, all parked normally, no suspicious circles or gatherings. Just drivers catching some sleep. Normal. Safe. I pulled up to the pump, swiped my card, and started fueling. That's when I noticed the writing on the bathroom wall, visible through the open door. Graffiti, but not the usual kind. It was those symbols, the geometric patterns, drawn in what looked like dried blood. My hands started shaking again, that same tremor I'd had 3 months ago. I yanked the nozzle out, not even caring that I'd only gotten half a tank, fuel splashing on my boots. I needed to get out of there, now. But as I moved to get back in my cab, I heard a voice that made my blood freeze. Zephyr. I turned slowly, every muscle tense. Orville stood there, but he was different now. The 3 months since our last encounter had not been kind to him. He was thinner, more angular, like something was eating him from the inside out and replacing his mass with something else. His skin had that gray pallor I'd seen on Ambrose, but worse. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the rest stop, I could see through it slightly, like looking through wax paper. Veins that should have been blue or purple were black, creating a spiderweb pattern under his translucent skin. His eyes had that same pale quality Ambrose's had, but they'd migrated further apart, and I could see through them too, like looking through dirty ice. "You're not supposed to be here," I said, my hand going to the tire iron I kept by the driver's seat. It wasn't much of a weapon, but the cold metal gave me something to focus on besides my fear. "The old laws protect you from forced recruitment," Orville said, his voice carrying an odd echo, like 2 people speaking slightly out of sync. They don't protect you from chance encounters. Joseph said, "Joseph Crow Dog is dead," Orville interrupted, and something in his tone told me he wasn't lying. Or as dead as someone with that many marks can be. The Phoenix chapter found him trying to burn off his marks with acid. The marks didn't like that. They took him fully. He's like Mitchell now, but worse. Much worse. My blood ran cold. Joseph, who had saved me, who had seemed so powerful with all his marks and knowledge of the old laws. If he couldn't escape, what hope did anyone have? "You're lying," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Orville pulled out a phone, the screen cracked but still functional, and showed me a video. I wished immediately that he had been lying. The thing in the video had Joseph's face, or part of it, but the rest, the marks had grown, spread, transformed him into something that made Mitchell look human by comparison. His body had elongated, stretched like taffy, with too many joints in all the wrong places. The marks had become three-dimensional, growing out of his skin like twisted metal sculptures. And his face, half of it was still recognizably Joseph, frozen in an expression of eternal agony. The other half had become something else, something with too many eyes and a mouth that opened in directions mouths shouldn't open. But the worst part was that he was still conscious. You could see it in the human eye that remained, the intelligence trapped in that ruined form, aware of what he'd become but unable to die, unable to escape. "The network doesn't forgive betrayal," Orville said, putting the phone away. "Even the attempt to leave is betrayal." Joseph knew that. He knew what would happen if he tried to remove the marks. But he did it anyway. The pain of existence became too much, even for one of the first. "I never joined," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't betray what I was never part of." "True," Orville admitted, "but you know about us. You've seen us, you've cost us recruits. Did you know that? 3 drivers who were ready to join heard about someone getting away, someone the great Joseph Crow Dog protected. They thought they could walk away too. Good for them. They were wrong." Orville showed me more videos on his phone, flipping through them like vacation photos. I won't describe what I saw. I can't. But those 3 drivers, what happened to them made Mitchell and even Joseph look fortunate by comparison. "What do you want?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. "The network has evolved since you last encountered us," Orville said, taking a step closer. I could smell him now. That mix of diesel and decay, but stronger, with an undertone of something chemical and wrong. "We've found new methods, better methods, ways to mark someone without their consent, without breaking the old laws." "That's not possible." Joseph said a lot of things," Orville interrupted. "But Joseph didn't know everything. The old laws are complex, full of loopholes for those who know where to look. For instance, did you know that if someone willingly transports an item for the network, even unknowingly, it creates a connection? A tiny thread that can be pulled to weave a larger web." He held up a small device, like a modified insulin pen, but the needle was wrong. Too long, too thick, and it seemed to move on its own, writhing like a worm. Technology and the old ways combined. One little prick, barely a mosquito bite, and the mark begins to grow, slowly at first. You might not even notice for weeks, maybe months. But eventually it takes hold, and then you're ours, whether you want it to be or not. I gripped the tire iron tighter, raising it slightly. "Try it." Orville laughed, that echoing sound getting worse, like a feedback loop. "Not tonight. Tonight is just a warning, or call it an education. You see, Zephyr, the network has decided you're too dangerous to leave alone, but too protected to take directly. So, we're going to make you an offer." I don't want, you'll want this, he interrupted. We'll leave you alone, completely. No encounters, no threats, no mysterious accidents. Your ex-wife and daughter will be safe. You can drive your routes in peace for the rest of your life. All we ask is that you do one thing for us. Despite myself, I asked, what? Transport one package, one time. Detroit to Miami. You don't ask questions, you don't look inside, you don't stop except for fuel. Do that, and you'll never see us again. The network will forget you exist. And if I refuse? Orville's face stretched into something that wasn't quite a smile. The skin pulled back too far, revealing too many teeth. Teeth that had multiplied and sharpened since I'd last seen him. Then these chance encounters will keep happening. And eventually, one of us might accidentally scratch you with something sharp. Something infected with the mark. Accidents happen on dark highways after all. Your daughter Emma, she drives now, doesn't she? Just got her license. Teenage drivers, so inexperienced, so vulnerable to road hazards. The threat against Emma made something snap inside me. You stay away from her. We don't want to go near her, Orville said, his voice taking on a false reasonableness. We really don't. Children are complicated for the network. Too much innocence. It interferes with the feeding. But accidents, as I said, happen. Unless, of course, you're under our protection. Then your family becomes untouchable. One package, Zephyr. One simple delivery, and all this goes away. He set a business card on the hood of my truck. It was black, completely black except for a phone number that seemed to shimmer and move, written in something that looked like silver but caught the light wrong. You have 1 week to decide, he said, already walking backward into the darkness between the streetlights. Call that number with your answer, or don't, and we'll assume you've chosen the hard way. Wait, I called out. What's in the package? What am I transporting? Orville paused at the edge of the light. Does it matter? It's just cargo. You're a trucker. You move cargo. This is no different than any other load you've hauled. It's completely different and you know it. Is it? His form was already becoming indistinct, melting into the shadows. Every load you've ever hauled has been part of someone's plan, someone's scheme. Corporate exploitation, consumer manipulation, environmental destruction. You think those refrigeration units you delivered to Phoenix were for humanitarian purposes. They were for a company that stores biological samples. Some of those samples aren't entirely legal, or entirely human. You've always been part of the network, Zephyr. You just didn't know it. He vanished. Not walked away, literally vanished. Between one blink and the next, leaving only the smell of diesel and decay and that black business card on my hood. I grabbed the card, got in my truck, and drove. I didn't stop until I reached San Diego, running on fumes and adrenaline, my hands gripped so tight on the steering wheel that I couldn't feel my fingers. I delivered my load of furniture to a normal warehouse with normal people doing normal jobs, and the mundanity of it felt surreal after what I'd experienced. That was a week ago. The card sits on my dashboard as I write this, the deadline approaching. 7 days to decide whether to become complicit in whatever the network is doing, or spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for that accidental scratch that will steal my humanity. I've spent the week researching, preparing, trying to find another way out. I've been in touch with other drivers who've had encounters, carefully, secretly, using burner phones and encrypted messaging apps. We meet in public places during daylight, never the same place twice, never for more than a few minutes. We share information, experiences, theories. There's a driver named Marcus out of El Paso who swears he saw an entire convoy of network trucks heading into the desert, toward coordinates where there's supposedly nothing but sand and rocks. He followed them as far as he dared, then watched through binoculars as they unloaded their cargo into what looked like natural cave formations. But the way the shadows fell was wrong, like the caves went deeper than they should, deeper than the geology of the area should allow. Another driver, Chen from Los Angeles, though Chen isn't his real name, none of us use our real names anymore, tells me about rest stops that appear and disappear. He'll be driving a route he's driven 100 times, and suddenly there's a rest stop he's never seen before. The signs are all wrong, pointing to cities that don't exist or distances that don't make sense. He's never stopped at one, but he's seen other trucks pull in. Those trucks never come out. Sarah from Denver, again, not her real name, has been tracking disappearances. Not just truckers, but specific types of cargo. Medical equipment, especially items used in organ transplant. Industrial refrigeration units like the ones I'd hauled to Phoenix. Specific chemicals used in preservation. Construction materials, but only certain types. Reinforced concrete, lead shielding, materials you'd use if you were building something that needed to contain something dangerous. Or keep something out, or both. We've started to piece together a pattern. The network isn't random. It has goals, objectives, a plan that's been in motion for decades. Maybe longer. Those things that Ambrose mentioned. The senior partners that gave them the marks. We think they're building something for them. Or building something to bring more of them here. Or worse, building something to transform here into wherever they come from. But knowing this doesn't help me with my immediate problem. The deadline is tomorrow. I have to make a choice. I've considered going to the authorities, but with what evidence? A business card with a phone number? Stories about rest stops and transformed truckers? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe put me on a psychiatric hold. And then I'd be helpless when the network came for me. I've considered running, just disappearing, changing my name and starting over somewhere else. But the network found Joseph in Phoenix. They have people everywhere. Dispatchers, DOT officers, truck stop employees. Where could I go that they couldn't find me? I've even considered taking the package, doing what they want. One delivery. Miami's a major port city. Whatever's in that package is probably leaving the country anyway. It's not my responsibility what happens after that, right? I'd just be a courier, a small cog in a machine that would keep turning with or without me. But I keep thinking about those videos Orville showed me. The 3 drivers who tried to walk away. What was done to them? And I know that if I take that package, I'm not just complicit. I'm actively participating in a system that does that to people. That transforms them into living nightmares. That feeds on human suffering. There's another option, one that Sarah suggested when we met yesterday at a crowded McDonald's during the lunch rush. Surrounded by normal people living normal lives, unaware of the darkness that travels the highways they depend on. What if we fight back? She said, keeping her voice low. Not directly, that would be suicide. But what if we start documenting everything? Building a case that's so overwhelming, so undeniable that someone has to listen. They control people in law enforcement, I reminded her. Media, government. Not everyone, she insisted. They can't control everyone. And there are others like us, drivers who've seen things, who know the truth. If we can organize, if we can coordinate, it's a long shot, maybe impossible, but it's better than the alternatives. I've made my decision. Tomorrow, when the deadline arrives, I'm not going to call that number. But I'm not going to run either. I'm going to keep driving, keep documenting, keep connecting with others who know the truth. We're going to build a network of our own, not one based on marks and transformations and feeding ancient things, but one based on protecting innocent drivers from the darkness that lurks at rest stops. Marcus has a cousin who works in cybersecurity, someone who can help us set up secure communications. Chen knows a journalist who's been investigating unexplained disappearances along trucking routes, someone who might be willing to listen if we can provide enough evidence. Sarah has been mapping the rest stops where encounters have happened, looking for patterns, trying to predict where the network will strike next. It's not much. We're just a handful of truckers against something ancient and powerful and connected to things beyond human understanding. But we have advantages too. We know the roads, we know the community, and most importantly, we're still human. We can still choose. The black business card sits on my dashboard, the silver numbers seeming to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. Tomorrow, the deadline will pass. Orville will know I've refused their offer. And then, I don't know what happens then. But I do know this. I'm done being afraid. I'm done looking over my shoulder. If the network wants me, they're going to have to come for me. And when they do, they'll find I'm not alone. There are others like me, drivers who've seen the truth and refuse to be part of it. We're out there on the highways, watching, waiting, protecting those who don't even know they need protection. My name is Zephyr, and I'm a truck driver. I haul freight from point A to point B, obey the speed limits mostly, and maintain my logbook when I remember. But I'm also something else now. I'm part of a resistance, a guardian of the highways, a witness to the darkness that lurks at rest stops after midnight. And if you're reading this, if you drive trucks for a living, or even if you just travel the highways regularly, remember this: not all rest stops are safe. Not all truckers are human anymore. And if someone offers you something that seems too good to be true, that promises power and wealth and protection, run. Run fast and far, and don't look back. Because the network is real. The marks are real. The things that give the marks are real. And once they have you, there's no going back. Joseph Crow Dog learned that the hard way. Those 3 drivers who tried to walk away learned it even harder. Mitchell learned it first, becoming one of those shadow things that scuttle between trucks in the dark. But we're learning too. Learning how to fight back. Learning how to protect ourselves and others. Learning that maybe, just maybe, the network isn't as invincible as it seems. The war for America's highways has begun. It's a quiet war, fought in the shadows of rest stops and the margins of truck stop parking lots. Most people don't know it's happening. Most truckers don't know it's happening. But it is, every night, as the network grows and spreads and feeds, and as we work to stop it. Stay safe out there. Keep your doors locked and your eyes open. Trust your instincts. If a rest stop feels wrong, it probably is. And if you see geometric patterns painted on trucks, symbols that hurt to look at directly, marks on drivers' arms that seem to move under the skin, keep driving. Don't stop, don't investigate, don't try to be a hero. Unless, of course, you're ready to join the fight, then find us. We're out there, the unmarked ones, the ones who saw the truth and said no. We're watching. We're waiting. We're protecting the innocent from the darkness that travels the highways. The deadline is tomorrow. By the time you read this, I'll have either won my freedom or lost it forever. But either way, the message will survive. The warning will spread. And maybe, just maybe, we can stop the network before it's too late. Before we all become like Mitchell, or Joseph, or whatever worse things are being created in those desert caves where network trucks deliver their mysterious cargo. Time's running out. For me, for all of us. But we're not giving up without a fight. The deadline came and went. I didn't call the number on that black business card. Instead, I threw it in a trash can at a busy truck stop, then thought better of it and fished it out, burning it with my lighter in the parking lot. The silver numbers writhed as they burned, and I swear I heard something scream, though it might have been my imagination, or maybe not. After everything I'd seen, I wasn't sure what was imagination anymore, And what was the horrible reality that most people were blessed to never encounter? For 3 days after the deadline, nothing happened. I almost started to believe that maybe Orville had been bluffing, that the network had decided I wasn't worth the trouble. I hauled a load of agricultural equipment from Fort Worth to Sacramento, sticking to major highways, stopping only at crowded truck stops during daylight hours. I kept in touch with Sarah, Marcus, and Chen through our encrypted channels, sharing routes and checking in at regular intervals. We'd developed a system. If anyone went more than 6 hours without checking in, the others would start looking for them. It was on the 4th night that things started to go wrong. I was heading back east with a load of electronics, driving through Nevada on I-80. It was around 2 a.m., that dead time when the highway becomes a river of darkness punctuated only by the occasional headlight. I'd planned my route carefully to avoid stopping until dawn, but the best-laid plans often go awry. My temperature gauge started climbing. Then the engine started making a sound I'd never heard before, a rhythmic thumping like a giant heart beating under the hood. I had no choice but to pull over. The shoulder of the highway was narrow, barely enough room for my rig. I put on my hazards and grabbed a flashlight, though I already suspected this wasn't a mechanical problem. The engine was fine. I'd had it serviced just 2 weeks ago. This was them, the network. They were making their move. I popped the hood, and the smell hit me immediately. That mixture of diesel and decay I'd come to associate with the marked ones. But there was something else too, something organic and wet. My flashlight beam caught it. Flesh, growing on my engine block. Pulsing, breathing flesh with veins that connected to my fuel lines and arteries that wrapped around my alternator. Jesus Christ, I whispered, stumbling backward. He can't help you here, a voice said from the darkness. I spun around. Ambrose stood there, but he was barely recognizable as human anymore. The transformation that had been starting when I last saw him had progressed dramatically. His body was elongated, stretched like he was being pulled from both ends. His arms reached almost to the ground, with too many elbows bending in impossible directions. His face had split partially down the middle, revealing a second face underneath, one that was all teeth and eyes. The geometric marks weren't just on his skin now. They were his skin, raised and three-dimensional, creating a topography of scars and symbols that moved and shifted constantly. "You missed your deadline," he said, both mouths moving slightly out of sync. That was unwise. "I'm not joining your network," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while reaching for the tire iron I kept in the cab. "Oh, but you already have," Ambrose said, gesturing to my engine. "You've been driving with our gift for the last 100 miles. The flesh is already bonding with your truck's systems. In another hour, maybe 2, the merger will be complete. Your truck will become alive. And since you're connected to your truck, registration, insurance, all those legal bonds, you'll be connected to it too. The mark will grow from machine to man. Clever, isn't it? We don't have to mark you directly. We just mark your property and let the connection do the rest." I looked at the flesh growing on my engine, watched it pulse and spread. It was already covering half the engine block, and I could see tendrils reaching for other components. "How do I stop it?" "You don't," another voice said. Orville emerged from the other side of my truck. He was even worse than Ambrose, if that was possible. His transformation had taken a different path. Instead of elongating, he'd become broader, more massive. Extra arms had sprouted from his torso, each one ending in hands that had too many fingers. His head had partially separated into 3 distinct sections, each with its own face, all of them wrong in different ways. But we're reasonable. We'll give you one more chance. Transport the package, Detroit to Miami. Do that and we'll remove the flesh from your truck. Refuse, and, well, you'll become part of your truck, and your truck will become part of the network. Mobile, conscious, eternal. Just another vehicle for our purposes. You're insane. Sanity is a human concept, Ambrose said. We've moved beyond human. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance, growing larger. Another truck. For a moment, I felt hope. Maybe it was a state trooper, or another driver who could help. But as the vehicle got closer, I realized it was a semi, and it was slowing down, pulling over behind my rig. The door opened, and someone got out. At first, I didn't recognize her. The figure was too distorted, too wrong. But then I heard the voice. "Hello, Zephyr." It was Sarah from Denver, who'd been helping organize our resistance. But she was marked now, the geometric patterns glowing faintly under her skin. Her transformation had just started. She still looked mostly human, but her eyes had that pale quality, and her movements were too fluid, like her joints had been loosened. "Sarah, no," I breathed. "How?" "They came for me 2 nights ago," she said, her voice carrying that slight echo I'd heard in Orville's. "I tried to fight, tried to run, but you can't run from something that controls half the trucks on the highway. They boxed me in, gave me a choice, join or become like Mitchell. I chose to join. At least this way I'm still mostly myself. For now. You betrayed us. I survived," she corrected. "And now I'm here to convince you to do the same. Take the package, Zephyr. It's not that bad. The mark, it changes you, yes, but it also opens your eyes. I can see things now, understand things. The network isn't evil, it's just different. A different form of existence. You sound like them. Because I am them now, and soon you will be too. One way or another." More headlights appeared on the highway. Then more. Truck after truck was pulling over, creating a line of semis along the shoulder. Their drivers got out, all of them marked. All of them in various stages of transformation. Some still looked human enough to pass in public. Others were so far gone they could only move in darkness. And in between the trucks, those shadow things, the fully transformed ones like Mitchell, scuttled and writhed. I was surrounded, trapped. "This is bigger than just the Amarillo chapter," I said, understanding dawning. "Every chapter," Ambrose confirmed. "When you refused our generous offer, word spread. You've become something of a celebrity in the network. The driver who said no. The one who thought he could resist. Some wanted to kill you outright. Others wanted to make an example of you. But the senior partners had a different idea." "The senior partners? They're curious about you," Orville said, all 3 of his faces grinning. "A human who saw the truth and still refused, that's rare. They want to study you, understand you, and then remake you into something special, something new. You should be honored." "Go to hell." "Hell?" Ambrose laughed, that dry, rasping sound. "Hell is a human concept, too. Where we're going, where we're taking this world, is so much more interesting than any hell humans have imagined." The flesh on my engine had spread to cover the entire block now. I could see it pulsing faster like it was excited. Tendrils were reaching for the cab, trying to find a way in. It was only a matter of time. I thought about Emma, my daughter, 16 years old, her whole life ahead of her. If I became one of these things, would they go after her next? Use me to get to her? The thought made me sick. "What's in the package?" I asked, stalling for time while I tried to think of a way out. "Does it matter?" Orville asked. "If I'm going to transport it, I want to know." Ambrose and Orville exchanged looks, difficult to do with their multiple faces. Then Ambrose shrugged, a motion that rippled through his elongated body. "Seeds," he said simply. Seeds? From the place our senior partners come from. Seeds that will grow in the right conditions. The package needs to go to Miami because from there it will be shipped to specific locations around the world. Places where the barriers between here and there are thin. The seeds will be planted, and they'll grow, and as they grow, they'll change the very nature of reality around them. Make it more suitable for our senior partners. You're trying to terraform Earth. Transform would be more accurate, Orville said. Earth, as it is now, is hostile to our senior partners. Too much order, too many natural laws, too much stability. They need chaos, fluidity, places where the rules can be bent or broken. The seeds will create pockets of such places, and from those pockets the transformation will spread. That's insane. You're talking about destroying the world. We're talking about evolving it, Sarah said, stepping closer. Humans had their time. Now it's time for something new, something better, something monstrous. Monstrous is relative, Ambrose said. To a caterpillar, a butterfly might seem monstrous. We're just the next stage. The flesh had reached the cab door now. I could hear it probing the seals, looking for a way in. In minutes, maybe less, it would find one. And then I'd become like them. Or worse. I made a decision. Fine, I said. I'll do it. I'll transport the package. All the transformed faces around me smiled in unison, a horrifying synchronized expression of triumph. Excellent choice, Orville said. We knew you'd see reason eventually. But I have conditions. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Ambrose pointed out. Maybe not, but if you want me to do this willingly, to not fight the whole way, you'll listen. They exchanged looks again. Then Orville nodded. Speak. First, you remove this flesh from my truck immediately. Second, you leave my family alone, permanently. No contact, no surveillance, no accidents. Third, after I deliver the package, I'm done. No more contact with the network. I go my way, you go yours. The first two are acceptable, Ambrose said. The third. Once you've served the network, you're always part of it. But we can promise minimal contact. You won't be marked. You won't be transformed. You'll be an independent contractor. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was better than the alternatives. Deal. Orville made a gesture, and the flesh on my engine began to recede, pulling back like a time-lapse video of decay in reverse. Within minutes, it was gone, leaving my engine exactly as it had been, running perfectly. The package will be waiting for you in Detroit, Ambrose said. Miller's truck stop, off I-75. Ask for Bartholomew at the fuel desk. He'll give you the package and the delivery instructions. You have 1 week to complete the delivery. And if something goes wrong, if I get stopped by DOT, inspected, nothing will go wrong, Orville said with certainty. We control too much for anything to go wrong. Just drive, deliver, and forget. That's all we ask. The marked drivers were already returning to their trucks, starting their engines. The show of force was over. They'd made their point. Within minutes, the convoy of network trucks was pulling back onto the highway, disappearing into the darkness like they'd never been there at all. Only Sarah remained. You made the right choice, she said, but there was sadness in her voice. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you did. Did I? I'm helping them destroy the world. The world's already destroying itself, she replied. Climate change, wars, inequality. At least this way, something new comes after. Maybe something better. You don't believe that. She was quiet for a moment. No, I don't. But I have to tell myself something to stay sane. What's left of my sanity anyway? She pulled something from her pocket. A flash drive. Take this. It has all the research I gathered before they got me. Everything about the network, the patterns, the disappearances. Maybe someone else can use it. Someone braver than us. Sarah, I have to go. They're already suspicious that I stayed to talk to you. But Zephyr, after you deliver the package, run far and fast and never stop running. Because once you've carried their cargo, you'll never really be free. You'll always be connected to them, even without the mark. And eventually, they'll call on you again. She got in her truck and drove away, leaving me alone on the shoulder of the highway with nothing but the darkness and the weight of what I'd agreed to do. I sat in my cab for a long time, staring at the flash drive Sarah had given me. Then I made a call on the encrypted phone Marcus had given me. He answered on the second ring, even though it was 3 a.m. Zephyr? You missed check-in. We were worried. They got Sarah, I said. And they got to me. I have to do something for them, a delivery. Don't do it, Marcus said immediately. Whatever they want, don't. I don't have a choice. But listen, I'm going to send you something. Sarah's research. Everything she found. And I'm going to add everything I know, everything I've seen. If something happens to me, make sure it gets to someone who can use it. Zephyr, Detroit to Miami. That's the route. Miller's truck stop too. They haven't told me the destination yet. But track my phone, follow my route, document everything. And if I disappear, if I become one of them, you'll know where and when it happened. We can help. Chen and I, we can... No, stay away. This is bigger than we thought. They have chapters everywhere, hundreds, maybe thousands of marked drivers. And those senior partners they keep talking about. Marcus, I think they're planning something huge. The package I'm carrying, it's seeds. Seeds that will change everything. I told him everything Ambrose and Orville had told me. About the terraforming, about the plan to transform Earth into something suitable for the senior partners. Marcus was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Seeds, he finally said. Seeds need specific conditions to grow. Temperature, moisture, pH levels. If we can figure out what conditions these seeds need, we might be able to stop them from growing, or at least slow them down, buy us time to figure out a real solution. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. A tiny spark of hope in an ocean of darkness. I have to go, I said. I need to get to Detroit. But Marcus, if I don't make it out of this myself, if I become one of them, promise me something. What? Find a way to stop them. The network, the senior partners, all of it. Don't let them win. I promise, Marcus said. But Zephyr, try to make it out yourself. We need you. I hung up and started my engine. Detroit was 18 hours away. Miami was another 24 hours after that. 42 hours to figure out a way to stop what I was about to do, or at least minimize the damage. I pulled back onto I-80, joining the river of headlights and taillights that flowed through the darkness. Most of the drivers around me had no idea what was happening, what was coming. They were just trying to make a living, hauling cargo from one place to another, keeping America's economy moving. They didn't know about the network, about the marks, about the things that waited at rest stops after dark. But I knew, and soon I'd be carrying the seeds of their destruction. The war for America's highways was over before it began. We'd lost. The network had won. All that was left was to try to minimize the damage, to save who we could, to document what happened so maybe future generations would understand how their world ended. My name is Zephyr, and I'm a truck driver. In 36 hours, I'll pick up a package in Detroit. In 60 hours, I'll deliver it to Miami. And then, I don't know what happens then. Maybe I run. Maybe I hide. Maybe I try to fight. Or maybe I just become another casualty in a war most people don't even know is happening. But before any of that, I'm going to document everything. Every mile, every stop, every detail. So if you're reading this, if you found this record, you'll know what happened. You'll know who was responsible. And maybe, just maybe, you'll know how to fight back. The geometric patterns are spreading. The marks are multiplying. The transformation of our world has already begun, and I'm about to help accelerate it. God forgive me, if God even exists in the world they're creating. The rain hammered against my windshield as I drove through the mountains of West Virginia, the wipers barely keeping up with the deluge. My name's Lysander. My parents were literature professors who cursed me with a name from Shakespeare. I've been driving trucks for 22 years, since I was 18, and desperate to escape my small hometown in Ohio. In all those years, through all the miles and all the stories truckers tell, I'd never believed in the supernatural. Bad luck? Sure. Coincidences that make you wonder? Absolutely. But ghosts, curses, haunted places? That was all bullshit as far as I was concerned. That changed on the night of November 8th, 2021, when I pulled into the abandoned rest area on Route 19, just south of Beckley. I shouldn't have been there at all. The rest area had been officially closed for 3 years. Budget cuts, the state said, though the locals told different stories if you got them drunk enough. But the storm had come out of nowhere, visibility dropping to maybe 10 feet, and I'd already passed 2 jackknifed semis. When I saw the old exit ramp, I took it without thinking. Better to wait out the storm in an abandoned rest area than to end up wrapped around a guardrail. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a facility that had been closed for 3 years. The parking lot was cracked, with weeds growing through the asphalt like nature was slowly reclaiming its territory. The main building, a long, low structure built in that 1960s architectural style that managed to be both futuristic and depressing, sat dark and empty, its windows either boarded up or broken. The sodium lights that once illuminated the parking lot were all dead, leaving only my headlights to pierce the darkness. But what caught my attention wasn't the building itself. It was the other truck already parked there. It was an old Freightliner, probably from the early 2000s, sitting at an angle across 3 parking spaces like the driver had just abandoned it mid-maneuver. No lights on, no engine running. The trailer doors hung open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. Rain had been blowing into the trailer, and I could see puddles reflecting my headlights from within the empty cargo space. I parked a safe distance away. You learn not to get too close to abandoned vehicles, never know what kind of trouble they might bring, and sat there for a moment, listening to the rain and trying to decide what to do. The smart thing would be to get back on the highway, storm or no storm. But something about that abandoned truck nagged at me. The doors wouldn't be open like that unless someone had opened them recently. Rain hadn't been falling long enough to create those puddles. Someone had been here within the last few hours. I grabbed my flashlight, one of those heavy mag lights that doubles as a club if necessary, and my rain jacket, then stepped out into the storm. The rain was cold, the kind that seems to find every gap in your clothing and soak you through to the bone. Thunder rumbled overhead, and lightning illuminated the rest area in stark, momentary snapshots. The abandoned truck's cab was unlocked. Inside, everything seemed normal at first glance. Standard sleeper cab setup, CB radio, logbook on the passenger seat. But when I looked closer, I noticed things that made my skin crawl. The keys were still in the ignition. There was a half-eaten sandwich on the dashboard, maybe a day or 2 old based on the mold starting to form. And the logbook, the last entry was dated 3 days ago. The driver's name was listed as Cornelius Ashford, hauling electronics from Baltimore to Nashville. but it was the note scrawled in the margin of the last entry that made me step back. They're still here, still working, God help me, they never left. I looked around the cab more carefully and found more notes, written on napkins, receipts, anything the driver could find. All in the same shaky handwriting. The night shift is still punching in. They can't see me if I don't move. The manager knows. She's always known. Don't go in the building, don't go in the building. That last one was written in what looked like blood on the inside of the windshield. I backed out of the cab, my heart pounding. Whatever had happened to Cornelius Ashford, it wasn't good. The smart thing, the only thing to do, was to get back in my truck and leave. But as I turned to go, I heard something that stopped me cold. Music. Faint, barely audible over the rain, but definitely there. Old music, like from a radio playing golden oldies, and it was coming from the rest area building. Every instinct I had told me to run, get in my truck, get back on the highway, forget this place existed. But there was something else, too. What if someone was in there? What if they needed help? The driver of that freightliner, maybe, or someone else caught in the storm. I made my way toward the building, flashlight cutting through the rain. The closer I got, the clearer the music became. It was definitely oldies, the Platters, Only You. But there was something wrong with it. The music kept skipping, repeating the same few bars over and over, like a record with a deep scratch. The main doors to the rest area were chained shut, but the chain was old and rusted. It took only a few solid hits with my flashlight to break it. The doors swung open with a groan that seemed too loud, even over the storm. Inside, the rest area was a time capsule of decay. The information desk still had brochures for attractions that had probably been closed for decades. Vending machines stood silent and dark, their glass fronts reflecting my flashlight beam. The floor was covered in a layer of dust and debris, and I could see footprints, recent ones, leading deeper into the building. The music was louder now, coming from somewhere in the back. I followed the footprints, noting how they seemed to wander, moving back and forth like whoever made them had been confused or lost. They led to the employee area, past a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. That door was ajar, and through it I could see light. Not electric light. Something softer, flickering. Candlelight, maybe. The music was clear now, that same snippet of song repeating endlessly. I pushed the door open and stepped through. What I saw there still doesn't make sense even now. The employee break room was fully lit, but not by electricity. Dozens of candles were placed around the room, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The room itself was clean, not abandoned clean, but actually clean, like someone had been maintaining it. There was fresh coffee in the pot, still steaming. Newspapers were stacked on the table, but when I looked closer, they were all from November 8th, 2018, exactly 3 years ago. And sitting at the table, her back to me, was a woman in a rest area employee uniform. "Finally," she said without turning around. I was wondering when the new night shift would arrive. "I'm not," I started, but she turned then, and the words died in my throat. She was maybe 50 years old, African-American with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her uniform was clean and pressed, with a name tag that read, Cordelia, Manager. But her eyes were wrong. They were looking at me, but also through me, like she was seeing something else entirely, and her skin had a strange translucent quality, like I was looking at her through frosted glass. "You're late," Cordelia said, standing up. 3 years late, to be exact, but I suppose that's better than never showing up at all. "I don't work here," I managed to say. "I'm just a trucker. I pulled in because of the storm." She tilted her head. confusion crossing her features. The storm? What storm? It's a clear night, perfect for the late shift. She moved to the coffee pot, poured 2 cups. Come, sit. I'll explain your duties. I should have run then, but there was something so sad about her, so lost, that I found myself sitting down at the table. The coffee cup she placed in front of me was hot, steam rising from it. Real coffee, fresh coffee, in a rest area that had been abandoned for 3 years. How long have you been here? I asked. My whole life, she said, then frowned. No, that's not right, since the night it happened. But that was just yesterday, wasn't it? Or was it longer? She rubbed her temples, looking confused. Time is strange here. It moves in circles. Always the same night. Always November 8th. November 8th, 2018? Her eyes focused on me sharply. Yes, the night they came to close us down, the night we refused to leave. We? The night shift, she said. All 7 of us. We'd worked here for years, decades in some cases. This place was our life. When they said they were closing it, that we were all being laid off with no severance, no pension, nothing, we decided to make a stand. We locked ourselves in, said we wouldn't leave until they negotiated. She stood up, walked to the window that looked out into the main rest area. Through it, I could see shadows moving, vague shapes that might have been people. Management sent security, she continued. Then the police. We still wouldn't leave. We barricaded the doors, turned off our phones. We said we'd stay here forever if we had to. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Be careful what you wish for. What happened? I don't know, she admitted. One moment we were all here, unified in our protest. The next, something changed. The lights went out. When they came back on, everything was different. The police were gone, our cars were gone, the highway outside was empty, and we couldn't leave. Couldn't. Try to walk out the door, and you end up walking back in through another one. Drive away, and the road just curves back to the parking lot. We're stuck here, all of us, repeating the same shift over and over. November 8th, 2018, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., every night. Forever. Thunder crashed outside, making the candles flicker. In that moment of shifting light, I saw them, the others. They stood in the doorway, 6 figures in rest area uniforms, all with that same translucent quality, all with those same wrong eyes. They stared at me with expressions of desperate hope. But you're here now, Cordelia said, gripping my arm. Her touch was cold, so cold it burned. From outside, from after. That means the loop is breaking, doesn't it? That means we can finally leave? I don't know, I said, trying to pull away, but her grip was impossibly strong. You have to help us, she said, and the others echoed her, their voices overlapping in a horrible chorus. You have to tell someone. You have to let them know we're still here. But you're... I stopped myself before saying, dead. But she knew. Are we? She asked. We still think. We still feel. We still work our shifts, clean the restrooms, stock the vending machines that no one will ever use. If we're dead, why are we still here? Why are we still working? The music skipped again, the same bars repeating. One of the other workers, a young man whose name tag read Jerome, stepped forward. The trucker who was here before you, Cornelius. He saw us too, but he couldn't help. He tried to leave, to get help, but every time he drove away, he ended up back here. For 3 days he tried. Finally, he just gave up, walked into the woods. We haven't seen him since. I thought about the abandoned freightliner, the desperate notes, the blood on the windshield. How many others have there been? A few, Cordelia said. Every year, on this night, someone finds their way here. Some see us, some don't. The ones who see us, they either run and never come back, or they get stuck like Cornelius. You're the first one who's actually listened. What do you want me to do? Find out what happened to us, she said. Our bodies must be somewhere. We can feel them, cold and forgotten. Find them. Give them proper burial. Maybe then we can rest. How am I supposed to? The lights suddenly blazed to life. Real electric lights, not candles. The break room transformed in an instant from lived-in to abandoned. The coffee pot was empty and rusted. The newspapers crumbled to dust. And the 7 workers, they were still there but faded now, barely visible, like after images on a TV screen. "Dawn," Cordelia whispered, her voice barely audible. "The shift is ending. We'll be back tonight. We're always back for the night shift. Please, help us." They faded completely, leaving me alone in an abandoned, ruined break room that smelled of mold and decay. The coffee cup in my hand was cracked and empty, covered in 3 years of dust. Outside, the storm had passed, and weak sunlight was filtering through the clouds. I ran back to my truck, started the engine, and peeled out of that parking lot like the devil himself was chasing me. But as I reached the on-ramp to the highway, I looked back one last time. The rest area sat silent and dead in the morning light. But in the window of the break room, I could swear I saw a figure watching me go. Waiting. Always waiting for the night shift to begin again. I made it about 50 miles before I had to pull over. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. I found a busy truck stop, one of those big chain operations with dozens of pumps and a restaurant and a store, the kind where there's always people around, always lights and noise and normal human activity. I parked between 2 other rigs, needing the comfort of being surrounded by the living. Inside the truck stop, I sat at the counter of the diner and ordered coffee with hands that still trembled. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a Tennessee accent, asked if I was all right. "Just a rough night," I told her. "Bad storm up in the mountains." She nodded sympathetically. "Those mountain storms can be something else, especially on Route 19. "That's where you were?" "Yeah. Had to pull off near Beckley." Her expression changed, became concerned. "Not at that old rest area, I hope? The abandoned one?" I must have shown something in my face because she leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You saw them, didn't you? The night shift? You know about them?" She glanced around, making sure her manager wasn't watching, then sat down across from me. "Honey, every trucker who runs these routes knows about that place. Been 3 years now since it happened. State tried to close the rest area, laid off all the workers with no notice, no severance, nothing. 7 employees were working the night shift when they got the news. They refused to leave. What happened to them?" "That's where stories differ," she said. "Official report says they left peacefully after negotiations. But truckers who've stopped there, they tell different stories. Some say the employees never left at all, that they're still there, still working the night shift, waiting for someone to help them." "Help them how?" She shrugged. "Nobody knows for sure, but I'll tell you what I heard from a state trooper who comes in here sometimes. He says there was more to the closure than budget cuts. Says there was an accident that night, November 8th. Something about a gas leak in the employee area. 7 workers were found dead the next morning, all in the break room. Carbon monoxide poisoning, they said. But the state covered it up, didn't want the liability. Just closed the place down and hoped everyone would forget. So they're dead? That's what the trooper says. But here's the thing, their bodies were never claimed. The state tried to contact next of kin, But it was like these people didn't exist outside that rest area. No family, no friends, nobody to claim them. So the state had them buried in some potter's field somewhere, unmarked graves. And maybe that's why they can't rest. I thought about Cordelia's words, about finding their bodies, giving them proper burial. Would there be records of where they were buried? The waitress gave me a long look. Why would you want to know that? They asked me to help them, I said simply. She was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her order pad and wrote something down. County Records Office in Beckley. Ask for Gladys Morrison. Tell her Patty sent you. She might be able to help. But honey? She put her hand over mine. Be careful. Sometimes the dead ask for things the living can't give. I left the truck stop with a destination and a purpose, though I wasn't sure why I was doing this. Maybe because Cordelia's desperation had seemed so real, so human. Maybe because I couldn't shake the image of 7 people trapped in an endless loop, working a shift that would never end. Or maybe I was just losing my mind. The Raleigh County Records Office was in a basement of a government building that had seen better days. Gladys Morrison turned out to be a thin, elderly woman with sharp eyes behind thick glasses. When I mentioned Patty and asked about the rest area employees, her expression became guarded. That's not public information, she said. Please, I said. I just need to know where they were buried. They deserve better than unmarked graves. She studied me for a long moment. You saw them, didn't you? At the rest area? I nodded. She sighed and turned to an old computer. I shouldn't do this, but I was there that night. Not at the rest area, but at the hospital when they brought the bodies in. 7 people, all dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. But here's what the reports don't say. There wasn't any carbon monoxide in that room. The detector was working fine, showed normal levels. But all 7 were dead with all the symptoms of CO poisoning. How is that possible? It's not, she said simply. Unless they were poisoned somewhere else and moved there, or unless... She trailed off, shaking her head. Unless something else killed them. Something that just looked like carbon monoxide poisoning. She printed out a sheet of paper and handed it to me. Mountain View Cemetery on the outskirts of Beckley. Plot 47B through 47H. 7 unmarked graves. The state paid for basic burial, nothing more. No headstones, no markers, just numbers on a map. I thanked her and turned to leave, but she called me back. Young man, whatever they asked you to do, be careful. The dead don't always know what's best for them. And sometimes helping them means refusing their requests. It was mid-afternoon by the time I reached Mountain View Cemetery. It was an old place, probably dating back to the 1800s, with elaborate Victorian headstones near the entrance, giving way to simpler, more modern markers as you moved toward the back. Plot 47 was in the far corner, where the cemetery bordered on woods, the area reserved for indigents and unknowns. 7 graves, just as Gladys had said. No headstones, just small metal markers with numbers. No names, no dates, no indication that actual people lay beneath the earth. It seemed wrong, deeply wrong, that 7 people who had worked and lived and hoped could be reduced to just numbers in the ground. I stood there for a while, not sure what I was supposed to do. I'd found them, but now what? I didn't have the money or authority to have them exhumed and properly buried. I couldn't even afford headstones. You came. I turned around. A young man stood there wearing a gas station attendant's uniform. His name tag read Phineas, Night Manager. He had the same translucent quality as Cordelia, the same wrong eyes, but he was clearer somehow, more solid, even though it was still daylight. You can manifest during the day? Only here, Phineas said, looking down at the graves. This is where we really are. That rest area, that's just where we work, where we're trapped working. He knelt down by one of the graves, placed a translucent hand on the earth. That's me, number 47D, 23 years old, working nights to pay for college. Was going to be an engineer. Phineas. What really happened that night? He stood up, and for a moment his form flickered like bad reception on an old TV. We were protesting, peacefully, just sitting in the break room, refusing to leave. Then the state sent someone. Not police, not security. Someone else. A man in a suit who said he could resolve the situation. He had this briefcase with him, old-looking, covered in strange symbols. What did he do? He made us an offer, said if we really wanted to stay at the rest area forever, he could arrange it. We thought he was being sarcastic, threatening us. We said yes, we'd stay forever if it meant fighting for what was right. He smiled and opened his briefcase. There was something inside, something that hurt to look at, like a piece of night sky that had been cut out and folded up. He unfolded it and Phineas's form started to break apart, pixels of light scattering like digital snow. We were in the break room, and then we weren't. We were dead, and then we weren't. We were somewhere in between, caught in that moment forever. Always November 8th, always the night shift, always waiting for dawn that never really comes. Who was he? The man in the suit? I don't know. But Cordelia might. She talked to him the longest. She signed something. We all did. Thought it was just a protest petition, but the words changed after we signed. Became something else. He was fading now, the daylight eating away at his form. Please, he said, his voice becoming distant. We don't need new graves. We need to be released from the contract. Find the man in the suit. Find the briefcase. Destroy what's inside. It's the only way to break the loop. How do I find him? He comes to rest areas, Phineas whispered, barely visible now. When workers are desperate, when they're about to lose everything, he makes offers, he makes deals, and he always gets what he wants. Souls to keep his rest stops running, the perfect employees who never quit, never complain, never leave. He vanished completely, leaving me alone in the cemetery with 7 unmarked graves and more questions than answers. I spent the rest of the day researching on my laptop at a coffee shop in Beckley. I searched for unusual incidents at rest areas, mysterious deaths of employees, stories of workers who refused to leave. And I found them, dozens of them, scattered across the country over the past 50 years. Always the same pattern. Closure or layoffs announced, workers protest, workers found dead under mysterious circumstances, rest area abandoned. But there was something else, too. In each case, in the weeks before the incidents, there were reports of a well-dressed man visiting rest areas, talking to employees, carrying an old briefcase. The descriptions varied. Sometimes old, sometimes young, sometimes black, sometimes white. But the briefcase was always the same. Old leather, covered in symbols, with brass clasps that looked like screaming faces. I found a forum for truckers who'd encountered strange things on the road. One post caught my attention. Saw him at the Flying J outside Columbus last week. Man in a suit, looked like a federal agent or something. Had this creepy briefcase. Was talking to the night shift workers, showing them papers. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was recruiting for permanent positions. The way he said permanent made my skin crawl. Left right after that. Heard later that 3 employees at that truck stop died in a gas leak 2 nights later. The post was dated a week ago. I called the truck stop. After being transferred several times, I finally got someone who would talk to me. A day shift manager named Carl. Yeah, we had an incident, he said, sounding tired. 3 employees died, Carbon monoxide leak in the break room. Except the investigators can't find where the leak came from. And now the night shift workers are saying they've seen them, the dead employees, still working, still doing their jobs. Management wants to close the place down, but we can't. We're locked into some contract that nobody remembers signing. Is the man in the suit still around? There was a long pause. How do you know about him? He's been to other places, done the same thing. He left a card, Carl said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Said if we ever wanted to renegotiate the terms, we could reach him at this number. But I'm not calling it. Something about that man wasn't right, wasn't human. He gave me the number. I wrote it down with a trembling hand. That night I sat in my truck in a well-lit rest stop, staring at the number. I knew calling it was probably the worst idea I'd ever had. But Cordelia and her co-workers were trapped, had been trapped for 3 years. And if this man was still out there, still making his deals, more people would suffer the same fate. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, smooth and cultured with an accent I couldn't place. Good evening. I understand you're interested in discussing terms of employment. I want to meet, I said. About the rest area on Route 19. About the 7 employees there. There was a pause. Ah, the Beckley location. Yes, they've been model employees, never late, never absent, never complaining. Though I understand they've been attempting to communicate with the living. That's a breach of contract, you know. They're dead. You killed them. I did nothing of the sort, he said, sounding genuinely offended. They signed a contract for eternal employment. They wanted to stay at their rest area forever. I simply facilitated that desire. The fact that eternal employment requires a certain change in status, well, that was in the fine print. I want to meet, I repeated, to discuss their release. Interesting. And what do you have to offer in exchange? I thought quickly. Information about other rest areas where the workers might be receptive to your offers. He chuckled, a sound like ice breaking. Very well. Tomorrow night, midnight, at the rest area on Route 19. Come alone and bring nobody. If I detect any surveillance, any recording devices, any attempts at treachery, the 7 employees will suffer in ways you cannot imagine. They may be dead, but there are worse things than death, and worse places than that rest area where they could be working their eternal shifts. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, knowing I'd probably just signed my own death warrant. But I thought about Cordelia, about Phineas, about 7 people trapped in an endless loop of servitude. Someone had to try to help them. I made one more call to an old friend who worked in construction. Jake, I need a favor, a big one. Can you get me some industrial-grade thermite? And maybe a priest who doesn't ask too many questions. Tomorrow night, I would face whatever this man in the suit really was, and one way or another, the night shift at the Route 19 rest area would finally end. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jake came through with the thermite. 3 small charges that he assured me would burn through anything, even supernatural contracts written on otherworldly paper. The priest was harder to find. Most clergy I approached either laughed at my story or backed away slowly when I mentioned the man in the suit. Finally, I found Father Miguel, an elderly priest from a small Hispanic church who had experience with what he called the old darkness. I've seen this before, he said, when I told him the story, sitting in his small office surrounded by crucifixes and saints' statues. Men who make deals, who trade in souls like commodities. They go by many names, crossroads demons, soul merchants, contract holders, but they all serve the same master, and they all want the same thing. Human souls bound in eternal servitude. Can they be stopped? Sometimes, he said, pulling out a worn leather journal filled with handwritten notes in Spanish and Latin. But it's dangerous. These beings operate on rules older than Christianity, older than any religion we know. They can be bound by their own contracts, forced to honor the exact wording of their deals. But they're clever, and they've been doing this for millennia. They know every loophole, every trick. He gave me a small vial of water, holy water, he said, blessed by 7 different priests from 7 different denominations. It won't kill him, Father Miguel warned. Nothing can kill something that was never truly alive, but it might weaken him enough for you to destroy the contract. How will I know which contract? He probably has hundreds. The original is always kept close, Father Miguel said. It will be in his briefcase, and it will call to those who signed it. The dead employees, if they manifest, will be drawn to it. Use that. Let them lead you to their own contract. I also made other preparations. I bought a small digital recorder and hid it in my boot. If the man in the suit could detect recording devices, hopefully he'd only find the obvious one in my pocket and miss the backup. I wrote letters to my ex-wife, to my daughter in college, to my brother in Seattle, explaining everything just in case I didn't make it back. I even recorded a video on my phone, uploaded it to a cloud service with a delayed release. If I didn't cancel it within 48 hours, it would be sent to every major news outlet and paranormal investigation group I could find. As darkness fell on November 9th, I drove back toward the abandoned rest area on Route 19. The weather was clear this time, stars visible through the windshield, but somehow that made it worse. At least the storm had given me an excuse to be there. Now I was walking into this with eyes wide open. The rest area looked different as I approached. Lights were on, not just a few emergency lights, but the full array of sodium lamps that would have illuminated the place in its operational days. The parking lot was empty except for 3 vehicles. The abandoned Freightliner that still sat at its odd angle, my truck, and a black Lincoln Town Car that looked like it had rolled off the assembly line in 1950, but somehow appeared brand new. I parked and checked my watch. 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes early. I touched the vial of holy water in my pocket, felt the weight of the thermite charges in my jacket, and said a prayer to whatever might be listening. Then I walked toward the main building. The doors were wide open this time, no chains, no obstacles. Inside, the rest area was fully operational, or at least appeared to be. The lights were all on, the vending machines hummed with electricity, and music played softly from hidden speakers. But it was wrong, like a movie set or a recreation. Everything was too clean, too perfect, like someone's idea of what a rest area should look like rather than what they actually look like. You're early. I appreciate punctuality. The man stood behind the information counter, and my first thought was that he looked utterly ordinary. Middle-aged, average height, wearing a simple black suit that could have come from any department store. His face was pleasant but forgettable. The kind of face you'd pass 1,000 times without remembering. Only his eyes gave him away. They were older than his face, older than anything had a right to be, and they didn't reflect light the way human eyes should. Lysander, he said, reading from a clipboard that hadn't been there a second ago. 40 years old, divorced, 1 daughter. 22 years of trucking experience. Clean driving record, mostly. That incident in Denver in 2015 was unfortunate, but we won't hold it against you. How do you know about... I know everything about everyone who travels the highways, he interrupted, setting down the clipboard. It's part of my job. I'm a recruiter, you might say, a headhunter in the most literal sense. He smiled at his own joke. Now, you mentioned wanting to discuss the Route 19 employees. I want you to release them." "Release them?" He seemed genuinely puzzled. "From their employment? But they're model workers. Never late, never absent, never sick. They're everything an employer could want. They're dead." "A technicality," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Death, life, these are just states of being. What matters is the work. And they work so beautifully. Would you like to see them?" Before I could answer, they were there. All 7 of them, standing in a line behind the counter like they were posing for an employee photo. Cordelia in the center, Phineas to her left, Jerome to her right, and 4 others I hadn't met yet. They all wore their uniforms, clean and pressed, but their faces showed their torment. They moved in small, repetitive motions. Cordelia wiping the same spot on the counter over and over, Phineas straightening the same brochure repeatedly, Jerome checking his watch every few seconds, even though it always showed the same time. 11 p.m. "See?" the man in the suit said proudly. "Perfect employees. They'll never quit, never demand raises, never grow old and retire. They're the solution to every employer's problem. They're suffering. Are they?" He walked over to Cordelia, passed his hand through her translucent form. She didn't react, just kept wiping that same spot. "They don't feel pain. They don't feel tired. They just work. It's all they can do, all they know how to do anymore. I'd call that peace, wouldn't you? I'd call it hell." "Hell," he mused. "Another human concept I've never quite understood. You create your own hells and then complain when you have to live in them." He walked back to the counter, and I noticed for the first time that he was carrying his briefcase. Old leather, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them, with brass clasps that did indeed look like tiny screaming faces. "Let me show you something," he said, setting the briefcase on the counter. "This is my collection. Contracts dating back centuries. Thousands of souls, all gainfully employed, all serving their purpose." He opened the briefcase, and I had to look away. It wasn't that what was inside was horrible. It was that my human eyes couldn't properly process what I was seeing. It was like looking at a space that had too many dimensions, a depth that went down forever. I caught glimpses of papers, millions of them, floating in that impossible space like leaves in a cosmic wind. And each paper glowed with a different color, pulsed with a different rhythm. "The Route 19 contract is one of my favorites," he said, reaching into that impossible space and pulling out a document that glowed with a sickly green light. 7 souls, all bound together. They wanted to stay together, you see. Wanted to remain a team. So touching, really. The moment he pulled out the contract, all 7 employees turned toward it in perfect unison, their eyes fixed on the glowing paper with desperate longing. They began moving toward it, but they couldn't get close. Some invisible barrier held them back. "This is what binds them," the man said, holding up the contract. "Standard eternal employment agreement. They work the night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. every night, forever. In exchange, they get to stay at their beloved rest area, never have to worry about being separated, never have to face the uncertainty of unemployment. It's really quite generous. They didn't know they'd be dead, didn't they?" He unfolded the contract and I could see the signatures at the bottom. 7 names in what looked like blood. Section 15, subsection 3, paragraph 2. Employment shall continue regardless of physical state, including but not limited to death, dismemberment, or dimensional displacement. It's all there in black and white, or rather, black and red. Nobody reads the fine print on a contract they're signing under duress. Duress? He laughed, a sound like glass breaking in reverse. I didn't force them. I simply made an offer when they were desperate. That's what I do. I appear when people are at their lowest, when they're about to lose everything, and I offer them a solution. The fact that the solution comes with certain complications, well, that's just the nature of deals, isn't it? I want to make a deal, I said suddenly. He raised an eyebrow. Oh? Release them, and I'll take their place. 1 soul for 7. That's a good trade, right? The 7 employees all began shaking their heads violently, mouthing no over and over. But no sound came out. The man in the suit considered my offer, tilting his head like a bird examining a worm. Interesting proposition, he said. But you're not rest area material. You're a trucker, a wanderer. You wouldn't be happy confined to one location. Then what do you want? I asked. There has to be something. He smiled, and for the first time I saw his true face, just for a second, like a mask slipping. Underneath the pleasant, forgettable features was something ancient and terrible, something that had never been human and never wanted to be. What I want, he said, is what I already have. 7 perfect employees who will work forever. But, he paused, pretending to think. There might be one thing. You see, I'm always looking for new locations, new rest areas, truck stops, service plazas, places where desperate workers might be willing to sign my contracts. If you could provide me with, say, a dozen leads, places where layoffs are coming, where workers are about to lose everything, I might consider releasing these 7. You want me to help you trap more people? I want you to help me offer opportunities to those who need them, he corrected. Think of it as recruitment. You'd be doing them a favor, really. Instead of facing unemployment, homelessness, despair, they'd have eternal job security. As slaves. As employees, he insisted. There's a difference. I felt the weight of the thermite charges in my pocket. 3 small devices that Jake had promised would burn through anything. But I had to get close to the briefcase, had to be sure the contract would be destroyed. Can I see the contract? I asked. Before I decide? He held it out, but didn't let go when I reached for it. Just to look, he said. No touching. Contracts are delicate things. I leaned in, pretending to read the incomprehensible text that seemed to writhe and shift on the page. The 7 employees leaned in too, drawn to their contract like moths to a flame. And that's when I saw it. A second document underneath the first, older, written on what looked like human skin. What's that one? I asked, pointing. The man in the suit quickly covered it, but not before I saw part of the text. It wasn't in English, wasn't in any language I recognized, but somehow I could read it. Master Agreement, binding upon all subsidiaries. Violation nullifies all subordinate contracts. Nothing that concerns you, he said, closing the briefcase. But I'd seen the brass clasps up close now, and I realized they weren't decorative. They were locks, and locks could be broken. I need time to think, I said, backing away. This is a big decision. Of course, he said, checking a pocket watch that materialized in his hand. You have until dawn, that's 7 hours and 43 minutes. After that, my offer expires and these 7 remain in my employment forever. And if I bring you the information you want, then we have a deal, he said. I release these 7, and you help me find 12 new locations with desperate workers. Simple trade. I nodded and started to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. Oh, and Lysander? If you're thinking of doing something foolish, like trying to destroy my briefcase or burn my contracts, Remember that these 7 souls are bound to those documents. Destroy the contracts, and you destroy them. They won't be free. They'll simply cease to exist. No afterlife, no peace, just nothing. Is that really what you want for them? I looked back at the 7 employees. Cordelia met my eyes, and in them I saw not just desperation, but resignation. She knew what I was thinking, knew what I'd brought with me, and she was shaking her head. "Don't," she mouthed. "Not worth it." But Phineas was nodding, his young face set with determination. "Do it," he mouthed. "End this." The others were split, some nodding, some shaking their heads. They couldn't agree even on whether existence as slaves was better than no existence at all. I left the rest area and sat in my truck, the thermite charges feeling like they weighed 1,000 pounds in my pocket. The holy water Father Miguel had given me was warm against my chest, like it was reacting to the presence of something unholy, and the digital recorder in my boot was still running, having captured everything. I had 7 hours to make a decision that would affect 7 souls. Save them and condemn 12 other locations worth of workers to the same fate. Destroy them to prevent more contracts from being signed, or find some third option that I couldn't see yet. I pulled out my phone and called Father Miguel. It was nearly 1 a.m., but he answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. "Did you see it?" he asked, without preamble. "The master agreement," I said. "Written on skin, if that's destroyed, all subsidiary contracts become void," he finished. "Yes, but getting to it would be nearly impossible. These beings guard their master agreements more carefully than anything else. It's the source of their power in this realm. What if I could get him to open the briefcase again? Then you'd have perhaps seconds to act, and he'd fight back with everything he has. These creatures, when cornered, can do terrible things. I've seen them turn people inside out, trap them in mirrors, send them to dimensions where physics doesn't work the way it should. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the 7 employees, trapped in their eternal shift. Thought about the 12 locations the man in the suit wanted me to identify. The dozens or hundreds of workers who might sign contracts out of desperation. "I have to try," I said. "Then, God be with you," Father Miguel said. "And remember, the master agreement will be deeper in the briefcase than the others. You'll have to reach past the subsidiary contracts, past the recent acquisitions. Look for the oldest thing in there, the document that all the others are connected to. And when you find it, burn it. Burn it completely. Every last fiber. If even a piece survives, it can regenerate." I hung up and checked the time. 1:17 a.m. 6.5 hours until dawn. I spent the next hour preparing, going over the plan in my mind, trying to think of every contingency. Then I drove to a 24-hour Walmart and bought supplies. Lighter fluid, matches, road flares, anything that might help ensure complete destruction of the master agreement. I also bought a small digital camera, uploading its memory card to the cloud with another delayed release. If I failed, at least there would be evidence. At 3 a.m., I returned to the rest area. The lights were still on, but they seemed dimmer now, like the power was failing. The man in the suit was sitting on a bench outside the main building, his briefcase beside him, reading a newspaper that looked like it was from the 1950s. "Back so soon?" he said, without looking up. "I expected you to use all your time." "I've made my decision," I said. "But I have questions first." "Of course you do." He folded the newspaper, and it vanished like smoke. "Humans always have questions. It's one of your more endearing qualities. How long have you been doing this?" He smiled. "Time is relative. I've been recruiting since before your country existed, before your civilization existed. perhaps before your species existed. I've had many names, many faces, but the job remains the same, matching desperate workers with eternal employment opportunities. Why rest areas specifically? They're liminal spaces, he explained, seeming to enjoy the chance to lecture. Places between places, where people are neither here nor there. The barriers are thinner in such locations. It's easier to make contracts stick when reality itself is uncertain. And the master agreement? How many souls are bound by it? His eyes narrowed slightly. Curious question. Why do you ask? I want to understand the scope of what I'm getting into, I said. If I help you find 12 new locations, how many contracts might that generate? He relaxed. Doing the math. I appreciate that. The master agreement governs all my contracts in this region. Approximately 3,000 souls currently. Each new location typically yields between 5 and 20 contracts, depending on the size of the workforce and the desperation level. 3,000, I repeated. All trapped like the 7 here. All gainfully employed, he corrected. Now, have you made your decision? I took a deep breath. Show me the contract again. I want to see exactly what I'm agreeing to. He smiled and opened the briefcase. Once again, I had to fight not to look away from that impossible space inside. The contracts floated in their dimensional pocket. Thousands of them, each glowing with the light of a trapped soul. He reached for the Route 19 contract, but I stopped him. No, I said. I want to see the terms of our deal. The new contract. You must have already drawn it up. His smile widened. Clever. Yes, I have. He reached deeper into the briefcase, past the floating contracts, and pulled out a fresh document that glowed with the silver light. Your agreement to provide 12 locations in exchange for the release of 7 souls. As he pulled it out, I saw my chance. The master agreement was visible, deeper in the briefcase, that ancient document written on human skin. It was connected to all the others by threads of light, like a spider web with it at the center. Can I hold it? I asked, reaching for the new contract. Of course, he said, handing it to me. You'll need to sign it, after all. The moment the contract touched my hands, I felt its power, cold and ancient, trying to worm its way into my mind. The text was clear now, written in English, spelling out exactly what I'd be agreeing to. But I wasn't reading it. I was watching the man in the suit, waiting for him to relax, to look away for just a second. It seems straightforward enough, I said, pretending to read. But this clause here about additional considerations. He leaned in to look where I was pointing, and I struck. Not at him, but at the briefcase. I dropped the contract and plunged both hands into that impossible space, reaching for the master agreement. The sensation was indescribable, like reaching into liquid nitrogen while being electrocuted. The contracts swirled around my arms, their text burning my skin like acid. No! The man in the suit roared, his human disguise falling away completely. What stood before me was something that had never been meant for human eyes, a writhing mass of shadow and light, with too many limbs and no face, just a void where features should be. But I'd reached the master agreement. My fingers closed on the ancient skin, and I pulled with all my strength. It resisted, the threads connecting it to the other contracts pulling tight. But the thermite charges in my pocket had broken when I lunged forward, the chemicals mixing, starting to heat up. The thing that had been the man in the suit grabbed me with appendages that weren't quite arms, lifting me off the ground. You fool! You'll destroy them all! Good, I gasped, my pocket now burning as the thermite ignited. I pressed my body against the briefcase, letting the burning chemicals fall into that impossible space. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The thermite, burning at over 2,500 degrees Celsius, fell onto the contracts like white-hot rain. They began to burn, all of them, the flames spreading from one to another along those connecting threads. The master agreement in my hands caught fire, the ancient skin curling and blackening. The creature dropped me, reaching for its briefcase, trying to close it, to smother the flames. But thermite doesn't need oxygen to burn. It was eating through the contracts, through the briefcase itself, through the very fabric of whatever dimensional pocket held them. The 7 employees appeared, no longer translucent but solid, real. They were free of their positions behind the counter, free of their repetitive movements. But they were also fading. "Thank you," Cordelia said. And for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled. "We're free." "I'm sorry," I said. "I couldn't save you." "You did save us," Phineas said. "This is better than eternal servitude. We can rest now." One by one, they faded away, their faces peaceful for the first time. As they vanished, I heard something else. Thousands of voices, all expressing the same relief, the same gratitude. 3,000 souls, finally free from their eternal employment. The creature writhed and screamed, its form becoming more unstable as its contracts burned. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" it shrieked. "The agreements, the balance, thousands of years of work." "Good riddance," I said, pulling out the vial of holy water Father Miguel had given me. I threw it at the burning briefcase, and where the water hit, the flames turned white, burning even hotter. The creature made one last lunge at me, but its form was coming apart, unraveling like a sweater with a pulled thread. "This isn't over," it hissed. "There are others like me, other recruiters, other contracts. You've won nothing." "I've won tonight," I said. The briefcase exploded in a flash of light that temporarily blinded me. When my vision cleared, the creature was gone. Where the briefcase had been, there was only a pile of ash and the lingering smell of burned leather and something else. Sulfur, maybe, or ozone. The rest area began to change. The lights flickered and went out. The perfect, too clean surfaces began to show their true age, dust and grime appearing like time was catching up all at once. The building groaned and settled, 3 years of deferred decay hitting it all at once. I ran for my truck as the building began to collapse behind me. Windows shattered, walls cracked, and the roof caved in with a sound like thunder. By the time I reached the highway, the entire rest area was collapsing in on itself, like it had only been held together by the creature's will. I drove for miles before pulling over, my hands shaking too badly to continue. I called Father Miguel. "It's done," I said. "The master agreement is destroyed. 3,000 souls are free. And the recruiter, gone, but he said there were others." "There always are," Father Miguel said sadly. "But you've struck a major blow against them. 3,000 souls is no small number. You should be proud." Proud. I didn't feel proud. I felt exhausted, drained, like I'd aged 10 years in one night. But I also felt something else. Purpose. The creature had been right about one thing. There were others out there. Other recruiters making their deals at rest stops and truck stops across the country. Other desperate workers signing contracts they didn't fully understand. I couldn't stop them all, but maybe I could stop some of them. The weeks that followed the destruction of the rest area were strange ones. I tried to return to my normal life, hauling loads across the country, sleeping in my cab at truck stops, eating bad diner food, and pretending that everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. I could feel them, the other recruiters the creature had mentioned. They were out there, at rest stops and truck stops across the country, making their deals, trapping souls in eternal servitude. I started keeping a journal, documenting every strange occurrence I encountered or heard about. Truckers talk, especially late at night when the coffee's strong and the roads are empty. Stories that used to seem like urban legends or tall tales now took on new meaning. The driver who swore he saw his dead partner still working at a way station in Montana. The cleaning crew at a rest stop in Arizona who only appeared at 3 a.m. and never spoke to anyone. The gas station in Nebraska where the night shift employees never changed, never aged, had been the same people for 20 years according to locals. It was 3 weeks after the Route 19 incident when I got the call that changed everything. I was hauling agricultural equipment from Iowa to California, stopped for the night at a truck stop in Nevada when my phone rang. Unknown number, but something made me answer it. Lysander? The voice was familiar but weak, like someone calling from very far away. Who is this? Phineas, from the rest area. I know you thought we were gone, but we're not exactly. I sat up in my bunk, suddenly wide awake. That's impossible. You faded away. You were freed. We were freed from our contracts, Phineas said. But we're still dead. And the dead, we don't just disappear. We go somewhere else. And Lysander, this place where we are now, it's full of others like us. Thousands of them. All trapped by similar contracts, all waiting for someone to free them. Where are you? I don't know how to explain it. It's like a waiting room between life and whatever comes next. We're stuck here because our deaths weren't natural. We can't move on until all the recruiters are stopped, until all the contracts are destroyed. All of them. That's impossible. The creature said there were others, probably dozens, maybe hundreds. 43, Phineas said. There are 43 recruiters operating in North America. Each one has a master agreement. Destroy all 43 and every soul they've trapped will be freed. How do you know this? Because we can see them from here. See their connections, their networks. Cordelia's been mapping them. She says to tell you she's sorry for what's about to happen. What's about to... The line went dead. I tried calling back, but the number was dead. I was about to dismiss it as a hallucination brought on by too much coffee and too little sleep when there was a knock on my cab door. I looked out and saw a woman standing there. She was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing jeans and a trucker's jacket. Pretty in a girl next door way with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked lost, maybe scared. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said when I rolled down the window. "My truck broke down about a mile back. My phone's dead, and I was wondering if I could use yours to call for help." Every instinct I'd developed over the past week screamed danger. It was too convenient, too perfect. A young woman alone at night, approaching a solo trucker for help. It was either a setup for a robbery or something worse. "There's a phone inside the truck stop," I said, pointing to the building. "They'll let you use it." "They're closed," she said. "Some kind of electrical problem. Please, I just need to make one call." I looked closer at her. There was something off about her appearance. Her clothes were too clean for someone who'd walked a mile along a dusty highway. Her boots didn't have a speck of dirt on them. And her eyes were older than her face, just like the recruiters had been. "You're one of them," I said. "A recruiter." Her pleasant expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around her. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. "You're the one who destroyed Marcus's collection," she said, her voice still pleasant but carrying an undertone of something ancient and hostile. 3,000 contracts, centuries of work, gone in an instant. "Do you have any idea what you've cost us?" "Those were people, souls, not collectibles. They were agreements," she corrected. "Legal, binding agreements. and you destroyed them. That makes you a criminal in our eyes. Your laws don't apply to me, don't they?" She pulled out a document from her jacket. It looked new but felt old, the paper, or whatever it was, seeming to bend light around it. "This is a warrant for your soul, Lysander, signed by all 43 recruiters. You've been marked for collection." "I haven't signed anything." "You don't need to. By interfering with our business, you've entered our jurisdiction. The warrant is executable immediately." She smiled, and her teeth were perfect. Too perfect, like a dentist's demonstration model. "But I'm willing to make a deal. Surrender yourself willingly, and I'll make it painless. You'll work for me personally, driving special cargo between collection points. It's honestly not a bad job. Eternal employment, no need for food or rest, no aging or illness. Some would call it an upgrade. Some would call it slavery. Slavery implies you have no choice. I'm giving you a choice right now. Come willingly or be taken forcibly. Those are your options." I reached for the vial of holy water Father Miguel had given me, then remembered I'd used it all on the briefcase. But I still had things in the cab. Salt I'd started keeping for protection, iron filings, a silver cross my grandmother had given me years ago. I didn't know if any of it would work, but it was better than nothing. "I choose option 3, I said, grabbing the salt and throwing it at her through the window. Where the salt touched her, her human disguise flickered like a bad TV signal. Underneath was something that hurt to look at. Not monstrous like the first recruiter had been, but wrong in a different way. She was too beautiful, too perfect, like someone had tried to create the ideal human form but had forgotten what made humans actually human. Her skin was like porcelain, her features mathematically perfect, but there was nothing alive in that perfection. She brushed off the salt with mild annoyance. "Crude protections. Did you really think table salt would stop me?" "No," I said, starting the engine. "But it distracted you." I threw the truck in gear and floored it. The recruiter had to jump back to avoid being run over. Apparently, even supernatural contract holders could be hurt by 80,000 pounds of steel and momentum. I heard her shriek of rage as I pulled out of the truck stop, but I didn't look back. My phone rang immediately. I answered on Bluetooth while merging onto the highway. "Running won't help," the recruiter's voice said through the speakers. "The warrant has been issued. Every recruiter in North America will be looking for you. Every rest stop, every truck stop, every way station. You can't run forever." "Watch me," I said, hitting the air horn as I passed a slower vehicle. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she continued. "We've been doing this since before your civilization existed. We've hunted souls across continents, across dimensions. You're just one human in a truck. One human who destroyed 3,000 of your contracts." There was silence for a moment, then, "That was luck." Marcus was old, complacent. He didn't expect resistance. We won't make the same mistake. The line went dead. I drove through the night, my mind racing. 43 recruiters. 43 master agreements. It seemed impossible, but Phineas had been specific about the number. And if the dead were really trapped until all the contracts were destroyed. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. Jake, my friend who'd supplied the thermite. "Lysander? Man, where are you?" "On I-80, heading west. Why?" "You need to get off the highway, now. I just had 3 people in suits come to my shop asking about you. They knew about the thermite. They knew everything. I didn't tell them anything, but they said they'd be back. Jake, listen to me. Get out of there. Leave town if you can. These people, they're not really people. They're dangerous. What have you gotten yourself into? Something big, something I can't walk away from. Just trust me and get somewhere safe." Somewhere public, with lots of witnesses. Lysander, I have to go. Be safe. I took the next exit, getting off the main highway onto a state route. If they were watching the major highways, maybe I could avoid them on back roads. But even as I thought it, I knew it was futile. They'd find me eventually. The warrant, whatever that meant in their world, had been issued. I drove for another hour before I had to stop for fuel. I chose a small, independent station in a tiny town, the kind of place that might not be on their radar. The attendant was an old man who looked like he'd been working there since the station opened. "Evening," he said, as I paid for the diesel. "Long haul?" "You could say that." He studied me for a moment. "You look like you're running from something." "What makes you say that?" "Been working this station for 40 years. I've seen all kinds come through. The ones running from something, they have a look, checking their mirrors, jumping at shadows. You got that look." "Maybe I am running." He nodded slowly. "Well, if you're looking for a place to lay low, there's an old monastery about 20 miles north of here. Benedictine monks. They don't ask questions, and they have a tradition of offering sanctuary. Might be worth a visit." "Why are you telling me this?" He smiled, and for just a moment his eyes flashed gold. Not the cold, ageless eyes of a recruiter, but something else, something warm and protective. "Let's just say, not all of us non-humans are in the soul-collecting business. Some of us prefer to help. You're not human?" "Haven't been for about 200 years. But unlike those contract holders you're running from, I chose my path freely. No deals, no contracts, just a choice to stick around and help when I can. The name's Phineas, by the way. Different Phineas than the one you knew, but we share a connection. How did you—" "Word travels fast in certain circles. What you did at Route 19 has a lot of beings talking. Some angry, some impressed, some hopeful. You've started something, Lysander. Something that can't be stopped now. I'm just one man. So was David when he faced Goliath. So was every hero who ever stood against the darkness. One person is all it takes to light a spark, and sparks have a way of becoming fires." He handed me a map with the monastery marked on it. "Go there. Ask for Brother Francis. Tell him Phineas the gatekeeper sent you. He'll understand." "Gatekeeper?" "We all have our roles to play. Mine is to guard certain passages to help travelers find their way. Yours, it seems, is to be a breaker of contracts. Now go. They're about 3 hours behind you, but they're coming fast." I took the map and left, following the winding roads north toward the monastery. The road grew narrower as I climbed into the hills until I was navigating a path barely wide enough for my truck. My mirrors scraped against tree branches, and more than once I had to stop and reverse to make a turn. The GPS lost signal about halfway up, leaving me with just the hand-drawn map and my instincts. Finally, just as the sun was starting to rise, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, I saw it. A collection of stone buildings perched on a hillside, looking like they'd grown from the mountain itself rather than being built. The architecture was ancient, European, completely out of place in the American wilderness. A bell tower rose above the other buildings, and I could hear the faint sound of chanting carried on the morning wind. The parking area was small, designed for cars rather than semis, but I managed to fit by jackknifing the trailer at an angle that took up most of the lot. As I climbed down from the cab, my legs shaky from the night's adrenaline, a monk in a brown robe was already walking toward me. He moved with purpose, but without hurry, like someone who had all the time in the world. He was older, maybe 70, with a face that managed to be both weathered and serene. His eyes were the kind that seemed to see through you, not in a judgmental way, but with understanding. "Brother Francis?" "Yes, my son, and you must be Lysander. Phineas called ahead. He has a phone? Brother Francis smiled. He has his ways. Communication between guardians doesn't always require technology. Come, you look exhausted. We have a room prepared. I can't stay long, they're hunting me. They cannot enter here, Brother Francis said firmly. This is consecrated ground, blessed daily for over 300 years. The recruiters, as you call them, have no power here. You know about them? The church has known about them for millennia, he said, leading me through an arched doorway into a courtyard filled with medicinal herbs and vegetables. The smell of rosemary and thyme was almost overwhelming after the diesel fumes I'd been breathing. We've been fighting them in our own way, offering sanctuary to those who flee their contracts, performing exorcisms on those partially transformed. It's a quiet war, but a constant one. He led me through stone corridors that felt impossibly old, past rooms where monks were copying texts by hand, past a chapel where others knelt in prayer. The whole place felt like it existed outside of time, a pocket of the medieval world preserved in modern America. The room he showed me to was simple. A bed, a desk, a cross on the wall, and a narrow window that looked out over the valley below. But it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, safe. Rest, Brother Francis said. You're safe here, and when you wake, we need to talk about the 43. You know about that too? We know more than you might think. We have archives dating back to the founding of this monastery, records of every recruiter, every master agreement, their locations, their habits, their weaknesses. We've been waiting for someone like you, someone with the will and the ability to actually fight them. I'm just a trucker. Moses was just a shepherd. Paul was just a tent maker. Joan of Arc was just a farm girl. God often chooses ordinary people for extraordinary tasks. I'm not religious. You don't have to be. The recruiters aren't demons in the biblical sense, and this isn't a holy war. It's simply a battle between those who would enslave and those who would free. The divine, however you understand it, is always on the side of freedom. Rest now. Tomorrow, we plan. I lay down on the simple bed, exhaustion overwhelming me. But sleep wouldn't come immediately. My mind raced with everything that had happened, everything I'd learned. 43 recruiters, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of trapped souls. And somehow, I'd become the focal point of a war I didn't fully understand. Through the narrow window, I could see the sun climbing higher, illuminating the valley below. Somewhere down there, normal people were living normal lives, completely unaware of the supernatural economy of souls operating in the shadows of their world. Truckers were delivering goods, families were traveling to vacation spots, workers were commuting to jobs, all of them potential victims or recruiters looking to expand their collections. Just as I was finally drifting off, I heard something, a whisper maybe, or a thought that wasn't quite my own. 7 down, 36 to go. It was Cordelia's voice, coming from somewhere beyond the veil between life and death. The employees of Route 19 were still with me, still fighting in their own way. I wasn't alone in this war. I slept for 16 hours straight, the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. No dreams, no nightmares, just blessed unconsciousness. When I finally woke, it was to the sound of bells, the monastery calling its residents to evening prayer. The sun was setting, painting my small room in shades of orange and purple. There was a tray of food on the desk, bread, cheese, apple slices, and a pitcher of water. Simple fare, but it tasted better than any truck stop meal I'd ever had. As I ate, I noticed a note beside the tray. When you're ready, come to the library. 3rd door on the left after the chapel. Brother Francis. The library, when I found it, took my breath away. It was a vast stone room with a vaulted ceiling, filled with books that looked older than America itself. But what surprised me more were the modern additions: computers, printers, LED lights carefully positioned to not damage the ancient texts. And it wasn't just monks in the room. Several other people in civilian clothes were gathered around a large table covered in maps and documents. They all looked up when I entered. "Ah, Lysander," Brother Francis said. "Let me introduce you to our allies." The first was a woman in her 40s, professionally dressed with the bearing of someone used to authority. "Sarah Chen," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Former FBI Special Cases Division. I encountered the recruiters during a missing persons investigation 3 years ago. 23 people vanished from a truck stop in Missouri. The Bureau closed the case, said they were runaways. I knew better. How did you end up here?" Brother Francis found me after I started asking too many questions. The monastery has been a safe house for those fighting the recruiters for longer than you'd believe. The next introduction was a young man, maybe 25, with the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time indoors. Multiple laptops were open in front of him, their screens filled with code I couldn't understand. "Marcus Webb," he said, without looking up from his screens. "I know, unfortunate name given the circumstances. I'm a white hat hacker. Been tracking the recruiters' digital footprints for 2 years now. They think they're invisible online, but everyone leaves traces. They use technology?" He finally looked up, his eyes bright with the enthusiasm of someone discussing their passion. "Oh yes, they've adapted beautifully to the modern world. Digital contracts, cryptocurrency transactions for moving resources, encrypted communications networks. But old systems updated for new technology always have vulnerabilities." The last person at the table was a middle-aged Hispanic woman with silver streaking through her black hair and eyes that held depths of experience. Something about her felt familiar, though I was sure we'd never met. "Elena Rodriguez," she said, and her voice carried an accent I couldn't quite place. "I was recruited once. 20 years ago, I signed a contract when I was desperate, about to lose my home, my children. But the contract had a loophole. It was conditional on me completing certain tasks. When I refused to collect other souls, the contract voided itself." "That's possible? To break a contract?" "Under very specific circumstances," she said. "The recruiters are bound by their own rules. They can't lie outright in their contracts. They mislead, they obscure, they hide truth in complexity, but the truth is always there if you know how to look. I've spent 20 years learning their language, their laws. I've helped 17 people find loopholes in their contracts. Only 17 out of how many thousands? Each soul freed is a victory," Brother Francis said gently. "But you're right. The loopholes are rare, difficult to find, and often require sacrifices that many can't make. That's why destroying the master agreements is so important. It's the only way to free everyone at once. So how do we do it? How do we destroy 43 master agreements when they know I'm coming?" "We don't do it alone," Brother Francis said. He pulled out a map of North America, marked with 43 red pins. Each pin had a small label with a name and number. Each pin represents a recruiter's primary location and the approximate number of contracts they hold. We have allies near each location, people like Phineas the Gatekeeper, beings who oppose the recruiters for their own reasons. Some are former contractors who found loopholes. Some are entities who see the recruiters as competition. Some are just good souls who want to help. It's still impossible, even with allies, 43 locations, which is where I come in," Marcus said, spinning one of his laptops around to show me the screen. It displayed what looked like a network map with nodes connected by glowing lines. "This is the recruiter's communication network. They think it's secure, but I've found a way in. Not deeply, I can't read their messages or anything, but I can disrupt it. Think of it as a DDoS attack on their supernatural internet. How long can you disrupt it? Maybe 6 hours, if we're lucky. The virus I've designed will flood their network with junk data, false contracts, phantom soul signatures. They'll be blind, unable to coordinate or call for help. 6 hours to hit 43 locations? Not all 43, Sarah said, pulling out a tablet. We've been doing risk assessment. If we can take out the 12 largest holders, the ones with over 5,000 contracts each, we'll free approximately 65% of all trapped souls. The remaining recruiters will be weakened, vulnerable. It would shift the balance of power dramatically. 12 teams hitting 12 locations simultaneously, Elena added. Each team equipped with materials that can destroy a master agreement, blessed thermite, holy water from multiple faiths, the dust of broken contracts. We've been gathering these materials for years. Who are these teams? Who's crazy enough to go up against recruiters directly? Brother Francis smiled. You'd be surprised how many people have been touched by the recruiters' evil. Truckers who've lost friends, families who've had loved ones disappear, religious leaders who've seen their congregants transformed. We have nearly 100 volunteers ready to act. They just needed someone to lead them, someone who's already proven it can be done. You want me to lead this? You destroyed Marcus, the original Marcus, not our young friend here. 3,000 souls freed in one night. You've already done what everyone thought was impossible. People will follow you. I stood up, walked to the window. The sun had fully set now, and stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere out there, at rest stops and truck stops across the country, recruiters were making their deals, trapping more souls. Every night I delayed was another night of contracts signed, lives destroyed. When? I asked. 3 days, Brother Francis said. The night of the new moon, when the veil between worlds is thinnest. The recruiters will be at their most powerful, but also their most vulnerable. Their connections to their contracts are strongest during the new moon, but that also means destroying a master agreement will have maximum impact. 3 days to prepare for war. The war's been going on for centuries, Elena said. 3 days to finally strike back. Over the next 3 days, the monastery transformed into a command center. More allies arrived hourly. The parking lot filled with vehicles, trucks, cars, motorcycles, even a few RVs. The dining hall became a briefing room. The chapel held special services for those who wanted spiritual preparation for what was coming. I met the team leaders, each one with their own story of loss and determination. There was Tommy, a former Marine who'd watched his entire squad sign contracts with a recruiter in Afghanistan, becoming eternal soldiers in a war that never ended. There was Rebecca, a rabbi from New York who'd seen her entire congregation vanish one Yom Kippur, all found dead the next morning, with contracts clutched in their hands. There was Muhammad, an imam from Detroit who'd been fighting recruiters for decades using prayers and rituals passed down through generations. My own team would tackle the largest target, a recruiter in Louisiana who held over 10,000 contracts. The recruiter operated out of an abandoned truck stop on Highway 61, the infamous Blues Highway, where legend said musicians sold their souls for talent. Turned out, those legends were more real than anyone imagined. With me would be Elena, Brother Francis, Tommy, a Navajo shaman named Joseph Crow, no relation to Joseph Crow Dog from my first encounter, and surprisingly, Phineas the gatekeeper himself. I've watched from the sidelines for 2 centuries, he said when he arrived. It's time to act. Besides, you'll need someone who can navigate the spaces between spaces. The Louisiana recruiter doesn't just operate in our reality. What does that mean? His truck stop exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What looks abandoned in our world is fully operational in others. We'll need to attack on multiple fronts, in multiple realities. That's where I come in. The plan was complex but elegant. At exactly 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Marcus would activate his virus, disrupting the recruiters' network. Simultaneously, 12 teams would breach 12 locations. Each team had primary and secondary objectives. Destroy the master agreement if possible, but if not, at least destroy or steal as many subsidiary contracts as they could. Even freeing a few hundred souls would be a victory. We had backup plans for backup plans, safe houses if things went wrong, medical teams standing by, both conventional doctors and those who knew how to treat supernatural injuries, legal teams ready to handle the inevitable cover-ups and investigations that would follow. The night before the operation, I couldn't sleep. I walked the monastery grounds, looking at the stars, thinking about how a simple decision to pull into a rest stop during a storm had led me here. That's when Cordelia appeared again, more solid than she'd been since her death. "We'll be with you," she said. "All of us who've been freed. We can't physically help, but we can guide you, warn you of dangers, maybe even distract the recruiters at crucial moments." How many of you are there now? 3,000 from Marcus's contracts, another few hundred from contracts that have been voided over the years. We're an army of the dead, Lysander, and we're all grateful to you. I just did what needed to be done. That's what heroes always say. She smiled sadly. You know, you might not survive tomorrow night. I know. Any regrets? I thought about it. Just one. I wish I'd understood sooner. How many contracts could have been prevented if I'd started this fight 3 weeks earlier? You started when you were ready. When the universe was ready. Everything happens when it's supposed to. Do you really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, my death, our enslavement, all of it was meaningless. But if it led to this moment, to the chance to free thousands, then maybe it was worth it. She started to fade as the first rays of dawn touched the mountains. Lysander, when you get to Louisiana, look for the blue door. That's the entrance to the between spaces. And remember, in there, reality is negotiable. Don't trust what you see, trust what you feel. She vanished, leaving me alone with the dawn and the weight of what was coming. In 18 hours we would strike. 12 locations, 12 master agreements, potentially tens of thousands of souls freed. It was impossible, insane, probably suicidal. But then again, I was just a trucker who'd seen something I couldn't unsee, learned truths I couldn't unlearn. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person in the wrong place at the right time, willing to do what needs to be done. The final briefing was at 6 p.m. All team leaders gathered in the chapel, our faces lit by candlelight that made us look like conspirators from another century. Which, in a way, we were. Brother Francis led us in a prayer, not to any specific deity, but to the concept of freedom itself. To the idea that no soul should be enslaved, that everyone deserves the chance to rest in peace. Remember, he said after the prayer, the recruiters will try to make deals even as they're dying. They'll offer you anything, wealth, power, the resurrection of loved ones. Don't listen, don't engage. Destroy the master agreements and get out. Sarah Chen stood up next. Local law enforcement has been notified through back channels to stay clear of our target areas. We have about a 2-hour window before federal agencies start responding. Use it wisely. Marcus was last. The virus deploys at exactly 11 p.m. Eastern. You'll know it's working when the recruiters start panicking. They've never been cut off from their network before. It'll be like suddenly going blind and deaf. That's your moment to strike. We synchronized our watches, old analog ones that couldn't be hacked or disrupted. We checked our equipment one last time. Holy water. Blessed by 7 faiths. Thermite charges mixed with sacred salt. Iron filings from meteorites. Silver crucifixes, Hindu yantras, Islamic talismans, Buddhist prayer wheels. Every tradition represented because nobody knew which might work against beings that predated all religions. At 9 p.m., we loaded into our vehicles. My team took 2 trucks, my Peterbilt and a rented box truck loaded with additional supplies. The drive to Louisiana would take us just under 2 hours, putting us on site right at 11 p.m. As we drove south, I thought about the truckers still on the roads, unaware of what was about to happen. Would they notice? Would they feel it when thousands of souls were suddenly freed? Or would it pass unnoticed, just another night on the endless highways of America? "You're thinking too much," Elena said over the CB radio from the box truck. "Hard not to. Save your energy for the fight. You'll need it." She was right. In less than 2 hours, I'd face a recruiter who'd been collecting souls for possibly centuries. A being with power I couldn't fully understand, in a place that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And somehow, I had to destroy its master agreement and free 10,000 souls. Just another night in the life of a trucker turned supernatural warrior. The abandoned truck stop came into view at 10:47 p.m. It looked exactly as you'd expect. Broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, parking lot overgrown with weeds. A few rusted cars sat at odd angles, long since stripped of anything valuable. The main building's roof had partially collapsed, and the gas pump canopy had fallen and lay twisted on the ground. But Phineas saw something different. "It's beautiful in the other dimensions," he said softly, gleaming chrome and neon, like a truck stop from the 1950s that never aged. That's where the recruiter really operates. How do we get there? The blue door, just like Cordelia said. We parked our trucks strategically, blocking the main exits in case we needed to make a quick escape. As we unloaded our equipment, I noticed movement in the shadows. The dead were gathering. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could feel them. Hundreds of souls drawn to this place where so many contracts had been signed. Brother Francis checked his watch. 10:58. Get ready. We approached the building carefully. The blue door Cordelia mentioned was barely visible. A service entrance painted a faded blue that seemed to shimmer slightly in the moonlight. Phineas touched it gently, and his hand passed through like it was water. This is it. The entrance to the between spaces. Once we go through, stay together. The dimensions can shift, try to separate us. Hold on to each other if necessary. 1 minute, Brother Francis said. We formed a line, each person holding on to the one in front. I was first with Phineas right behind me to guide. My hand tightened on the bag containing our weapons against the supernatural. 30 seconds. I could hear my heartbeat, feel the weight of what we were about to do. 10 seconds. Somewhere, 11 other teams were preparing to breach their targets. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Church bells rang somewhere in the distance, marking 11 p.m. And in that moment, I felt it. A ripple through reality as Marcus's virus deployed. The air itself seemed to shudder. From inside the building came an inhuman shriek of rage and confusion. "Now!" I shouted, and plunged through the blue door. The sensation was indescribable, like falling up while standing still, like being turned inside out while remaining whole. For a moment, I existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, seeing the truck stop as it was, as it had been, and as it could be, all overlapping in impossible ways. Then we were through, standing in a truck stop that belonged in a Norman Rockwell painting if Norman Rockwell had painted nightmares. Everything was too bright, too clean, too perfect. The floors reflected light that had no source. The walls showed ads for products that had never existed. And behind the counter stood the recruiter. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, wearing the uniform of a truck stop manager but stretched over a frame that was wrong in every proportion. Its face was a constantly shifting mass of features, never quite settling on one appearance. And its hands. It had too many hands, all of them holding different contracts, shuffling them like cards. "You," it said in a voice like grinding gears. "You're the one who killed Marcus." "I'm the one who freed his victims," I corrected. Semantics. It tried to reach for something, presumably its communication device, but nothing happened. The confusion on its shifting face was almost comical. "What did you do?" "Cut you off," I said. "No network, no backup, just you and us. You think you can destroy me? I've been collecting souls since before your country existed. I have 10,000 contracts." "Had," Elena corrected, pulling out a vial of the broken contract dust. "Past tense." The recruiter laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think your little tricks will work on me? I exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. You're seeing barely a fraction of my true form." That's when Phineas stepped forward, and his human disguise fell away. What stood in his place was something that made even the recruiter step back. Phineas, the gatekeeper, was revealed, a being of pure light and shadow, with wings made of doorways and eyes that saw into every possible dimension. 17 dimensions? Phineas said, his voice echoing from everywhere at once. How quaint. I guard the passages between hundreds, and in all of them you're about to burn. The battle was joined.